Chapter 1178. In any case, Noah was delighted to learn that he could make his own items from Yggdrasil in the underground tomb of Nasarek. The various items from Yggdrasil that he had obtained from the treasure hall in the underground tomb of Nasarek were quite useful. Some of them were extremely magical and could achieve effects that even mythical relics could not. Therefore, even if he was not a collector, Noah wanted to collect as many items from the game as possible to deal with various situations in the future. Of course, the items that could be made in the underground tomb of Nasarek were only a part of the items. They could not make all the items in Yggdrasil. This was especially true for those rare and precious items. There were very few of them that could be made by themselves. Even so, it was much better than not being able to make anything. After confirming the various management and operations of the underground tomb of Nasarek, Noah began to operate the entire underground tomb of Nasarek. Yerbed and Demiurgos were still discussing the specific plan. Zaisha, Yal, Mer, Cosidis, and the other guardians were in charge of assisting the two of them. They managed the operations of the various floors while deciding on the direction of the plan. The Sunshine Scripture group that Yerbed had brought back to the underground tomb of Nasarek were treated as a source of information. The guardians used various methods to obtain all kinds of information. Noah had no way of knowing how miserable these people ended up, nor was he interested in finding out. A group of people who could slaughter innocent villagers without hesitation to complete a mission must have done similar things many times. Since they could do cruel things to others, it was natural for them to be treated cruelly. This was probably an eye for an eye, right? Under such circumstances, Noah gradually learned all kinds of information from this world. Therefore, for the next period of time, Noah worked on the management of the underground tomb of Nasarek while collecting information from this world. His days were quite busy. In the underground tomb of Nasarek, most of the mutant creatures lived much more conveniently than humans. For example, vampires, zombies, skeletons, and other undead creatures that were transformed from the dead did not need to eat, sleep, or even other physiological needs. They could move around 24 hours a day. They had much more time and convenience than humans. Noah was still a human after all. However, in Yggdrasil, there were also items that allowed people to not need to eat or feel tired. With the effects of these items, Noah could also not eat or sleep. However, in this way, even if there were no physical problems, the accumulated mental fatigue would become very terrifying. Therefore, even if there were such items, Noah did not use them. He still ate 3 meals a day and slept well. Even if his life was not comfortable, it was still very fulfilling. In such a life, Noah had to face an extremely troublesome problem every day. Noah, who was a little concerned about the progress of the production of the props, had just returned to his room and opened the door to the master bedroom when an extremely sweet voice rang out. "Welcome back, Lord Noah." Hearing this voice, Noah, who was originally a little absent-minded, first froze, then his body softened. He weakly raised his head and looked into the bedroom. He saw that on the bed that was luxurious enough to fit 4 or 5 people, there was a naked Yerbel wrapped around herself with a thin blanket. Her face was slightly red, and her eyes were swaying. She looked at Noah shyly. "Are you going to eat me first? Or are you going to eat me first? You're going to eat me first, right?" Such a scene would happen at least once a day. He did not know how, but every time, Yerbel would arrive at Noah's room before Noah. She would go into the master bedroom, take off all her clothes, and greet Noah with this appearance. It had to be said that this scene was quite fatal for men. In the past, when the S-rank magic shooter promotion exam was about to be held, Noah, who had returned home after working hard, was greeted by Mira and Lisanna in a somewhat joking manner. At that time, Noah could not hold himself back. Amidst the screams and screams of Mira and Lisanna, he pressed the 2 delicate fiancées down. Whether it was in terms of appearance or figure, Yerbed would not lose to Mira and Lisanna. With Yerbel's peerless beauty, even if Noah could control his rationality, he would still be aroused. However, every time Bell tempted Noah like this, Noah only had one impulse. The impulse to turn around and run. It was not that Noah looked down on Bell. Instead, it was Bell's shy smile that made Noah feel a chill run down his spine. It was an extremely explicit desire hidden under Bell's smile. That could already be described as beastly desire, right? If Bell had shown a bashful expression of wanting to be pushed down, then Noah might not have been able to control himself. However, Bell had never shown a passive seduction, but an active seduction. It was not a bashful expression of wanting to be pushed down. Instead, it was a crazed expression of wanting to swallow Noah whole, skin and bones, and eat him up. Therefore, Noah knew that once he showed that kind of intention, Bell would instantly turn into the most terrifying carnivorous beast. She would lock him up, strip him naked, and entangle him for 3 days and 3 nights. As a result, which man wouldn't be sweating profusely? At least, Noah almost broke out in cold sweat the first time. And when Noah froze, Bell seemed to be a step ahead of him. She pressed on the sheets while leaning forward, crawling towards Noah, the redness on her face becoming more and more intense. "You must be tired, right? Please hurry up and go to bed." Noah did not even think and shook his head vigorously like a rattle drum. "Please don't feel shy, Lord Noah." Bell acted as if she did not see anything, sticking out her red tongue and licking her lips. "Actually, you only need to close your eyes for a moment, and it will be over very quickly. Just leave everything to me, I will definitely squeeze you dry, until you are satisfied." "You definitely just wanted to squeeze me dry, right?" Noah could not help but speak up. He even took a step back and pointed at Bell. "Bell, don't be like this. We have a very pure relationship between a superior and a subordinate. If you make the atmosphere all pink, it will be very difficult for me." "Lord Noah, you don't have to feel difficult." Bell shyly tugged at the sheets, not caring about her occasionally exposed fair skin. She actually revealed an expression that made people think of drooling. "As a subordinate, I should make my master feel comfortable." While saying this, Bell vaguely glanced at Noah's lower body. No matter what it is, Noah really wanted to turn around and run away. This peerlessly beautiful girl in front of him was really too dangerous. Even a carnivore was not so terrifying. At this moment, Bell was already panting heavily, her face was flushed to the extreme. She looked at Noah with a burning gaze, and even her body was tense. She looked as if she was ready to pounce on Noah at any time. Noah finally could not stand it anymore. I remember now." Noah stepped back and smiled embarrassedly. "Today is the day I decided to go to the human city. Bell, I'll leave this matter to you." After saying this, Noah ran away amidst Bell's screams. "Woo woo 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 woo. I failed again." As soon as the door was closed, a burst of vulgar roars sounded from inside the room, causing cold sweat to flow down Noah's forehead. Why? Why am I reduced to running away from my own room every day? Just as Noah was about to die, a voice transmitted into Noah's mind. It was a voice that was directly transmitted using the message, magic. "Lord Noah, everything is ready." Only then did Noah pull himself together. Chapter 1179. Elantir. This was an important city located at the border of the Bahaz Empire and the Syrian cult nation, but it belonged to the kingdom of Restige and was connected to the 3 nations. The city was surrounded by 3 layers of city walls, which protected the inside and outside of the city. Each town within the city walls had its own unique features. The outermost layer of city walls was used as the kingdom's garrison base, which was an area with complete military equipment. The innermost layer of the city was the central administrative area of the city, where there was a warehouse for military food reserves, which was a heavily protected area. The middle area between the two areas was the residential area for the citizens. In this area, there were a few rather vast squares. The largest one was called the Central Square. Many people set up stalls there, selling all kinds of goods. Beside the bustling crowd, the owners of the stalls were shouting at the pedestrians on the street. Here, the sound of bargaining could be heard everywhere. Here, the sound of laughter and conversation could be heard everywhere. It was believed that no matter who it was, they would be able to experience the true feeling of life here, which made people feel quite peaceful. However, if one observed carefully, one would be able to notice. In such a lively square, from time to time, people would appear from the buildings on both sides of the square. They were either equipped with long swords or leather armor. There were even people who were fully armed to the teeth and wearing heavy full-body armor. For these people who did not fit in with the life around them, the surrounding residents only glanced at them once or twice, and then ignored them. Clearly, it was not rare to see such people who did not fit in with their surroundings. Therefore, the surrounding residents were already used to it. However, at a certain moment, the residents in the square all focused their attention in one direction, and their eyes were all filled with amazement. They saw that, in the place where many of the residents' amazement converged, a man and woman were strolling on the street. Although the man could not be said to be everywhere, he had a rare young man with black hair and black eyes. The woman had the same black hair and black eyes as the man, and her beautiful long black hair was tied into a ponytail, hanging behind her back. She was wearing a dark brown robe, and there was a long sword at her waist. She had an extremely delicate appearance, and was filled with the charm of an exotic girl. This pair of man and woman attracted the attention of all the residents present. There were two reasons. One was naturally the stunning appearance of the ponytailed girl. The other reason was that both the man and woman had an otherworldly temperament. It was this extraordinary temperament that attracted the attention of the surrounding residents. Of course, temperament was something intangible. It could attract the attention of others, but most of the people who were attracted to it did not understand why they were attracted to it. Simply put, there was an inexplicable sense of existence that made people unable to ignore such a pair of man and woman. This was especially true for the ponytailed girl. She had an exquisite and beautiful appearance that captured the eyes of many men present. The ponytailed girl did not have any expression on her face, but the displeasure in her eyes could be faintly detected by attentive people. Coincidentally, the person the young girl was following was such a meticulous person. "What's wrong?" Noah asked with a faint smile. "You don't like being the center of attention." "Annabelle." "Of course." Annabelle answered without hesitation. "A bunch of short-sighted lowly life forms. If they could just catch a glimpse of the face of the utmost exalted, that would be an immense blessing. To think that they would dare to ignore the existence of Lord Noah right now. This is truly infuriating." It seemed that Annabelle was not unhappy because she was the center of attention, but because she felt that Noah should be the one to bear the attention, not her. Annabelle was unhappy because most of the surrounding residents were paying attention to her stunning appearance, not the master whom they obeyed. For Noah, Annabelle's answer could be said to be both within and outside of his expectations. This was because the NPCs in the big underground tomb of Nasarick basically had an attitude of obeying Noah's orders and everything in their lives. This made Noah feel very touched sometimes, but also quite helpless sometimes. At that moment, Noah looked around and looked at the armed personnel who seemed out of place with the surroundings. Are those the adventurers of this world? The so-called adventurers, in the world of looking for a chance encounter in the dungeon, referred to those combat experts who were engaged in the exploration of the dungeon. In this world, the adventurers were engaged in a wider range of work. Just like in the world of looking for a chance encounter in the dungeon, this world also had an adventurers guild. The main function of this guild was very similar to that of the Magic Shooter Guild in the world of Fairy Tale. It was to post commissions from other people and let adventurers choose from them, so that they could complete various commissions and earn commission rewards. In other words, the adventurers were similar to multifunctional mercenaries in this world and also similar to the magic shooters in the world of Fairy Tale, but in terms of status, they were not as favored as the magic shooters and were closer to the mercenaries. After all, the main job of the adventurers was to eliminate all kinds of monsters that threatened humans. Although the nature was not the same, the atmosphere given to Noah in this world was indeed very similar to the Maze City Eulalia in the world of looking for a chance encounter in the dungeon. However, there was no god in this world, and there was no god's grace. Otherwise, humans would not have become a relatively weak race in this world. Of course, the existence of martial arts and magic still allowed humans to have their own strength. However, this strength could not be obtained by fighting monsters and leveling up, but must be trained step by step. By the way, Sir Noah. Annabelle's expressionless face suddenly became hesitant, and she said hesitantly, "Why would you let me go with you?" Annabelle's words made Noah blink. "Why? Don't you want to come out with me?" Of course not." Annabelle shook her head hard, and even her voice became a little high-pitched. "To be able to go with the Honorable Supreme. Such an honor. How could I not be willing to accept it? You guys just like to make a fuss." Noah sighed and waved his hand. "Is it strange for me to let you come out with me?" "No." Annabelle seemed to have calmed down and said very seriously, "It's just that compared to me, Sir Heartfelt should be more suitable to go with Sir Noah." Indeed, in the big underground tomb of Nasarick, no one was more suitable to be Noah's guard than Heartfelt, who was fully armed and had an impenetrable defense. Even if it was not Heartfelt, the other guardians would definitely be more suitable to follow Noah than Heartfelt. There was no other reason, but the guardians were basically at the maximum level of 100. On the other hand, Annabelle was only level 63. She was still far from the maximum level of 100. To put it bluntly, with Annabelle's level, any guardian at the maximum level could easily subdue her with one hand. In terms of a guard, Annabelle was indeed not a good choice. The problem was if Noah needed a guard. "I never thought of being protected for everything, Annabelle." Noah shrugged. "Moreover, our purpose this time is to find a way to get a little of the world's money and see if it can be used to maintain the big underground tomb of Nasarick. We need to be in contact with humans, but most of the guardians have the appearance of aliens, so it's not suitable for them to come out together." After saying that, Noah glanced at Annabelle and said with emotion, "Don't worry. Also, I asked you to come with me to see if my words last time could change your attitude, but you haven't changed at all." Annabelle was speechless. In fact, for Annabelle, who was a little inflexible, Noah's words only made her feel a little confused, but it could not change her original intention. The NPCs in the big underground tomb of Nasarick basically believed in loyalty. Noah wanted to change this loyalty with just a few words. It could only be said that there was no possibility. Chapter 1180. In fact, after this period of getting along, Noah more or less understood the fact that the loyalty of the NPCs in the big underground tomb of Nasarick was basically impossible to have a problem. This did not mean that Noah believed that the settings in the game would continue in this world, but it was a rational judgment. No matter which race it was, the meaning of survival was necessary. If there was no meaning of survival, then how could it be considered alive? The NPCs in the big underground tomb of Nasarick regarded loyalty to their ruler as their meaning of survival. This was because these NPCs were originally created for this purpose. In other words, as long as Noah's meaning of survival did not go wrong, then the NPCs in the big underground tomb of Nasarick were basically impossible to betray. Even if Noah was a rude and unreasonable person, it was the same. This could already be seen from the last test of the Guardians. That was why Noah wasn't surprised that Annabelle was as loyal and respectful as ever. He just felt emotional that his words back then hadn't been able to sway this combat maid. Of course, those things were no longer important now. After all, Noah had decided to accept the loyalty of the NPCs in the big underground tomb of Nasaric, right? It was precisely because of this loyalty that Annabelle was somewhat unable to accept letting her, who was not strong enough, guard Noah. As if seeing through Annabelle's thoughts, Noah shook his head with a smile. Well, you don't have to think so much. Regardless of whether I need protection or not, from the perspective of a guard, you are not unsuitable. Even if you are not as good as the full-level guardians, your level is enough to dominate this world. According to the information obtained from the people of Sunshine Scripture, and compared it with the game Yggdrasil, Noah more or less understood how high the power system of this world was. To be more precise, it should be said that he understood how high the power system of humans in this world was. In this world, adventurers had their own level. This level was usually identified by a metal identification plate. Depending on the abilities of the Adventurers Guild would grant them identification plates made of different metals. These metal identification plates were made of copper, iron, silver, gold, platinum, mithril, orichalcum, and stainless steel, according to their hardness and preciousness. There were a total of 8 kinds of metal identification plates, which were copper, iron, silver, gold, platinum, mithril, mountain copper, and stainless steel. The closer it was to steel, the stronger the adventurer's ability would be. Based on the levels in Yggdrasil and this world's spellcaster levels, the division should be like this. Adventurers with bronze and iron plates were generally equivalent to level 1 to 7 in Yggdrasil. They were equivalent to spellcasters who could cast spells of the first order. Silver and gold adventurers were generally equivalent to level 8 to 14 in Yggdrasil. They were equivalent to magic chanters who could use second-level magic. Platinum and mithril adventurers were generally equivalent to level 15 to 21 in Yggdrasil. They were equivalent to magic chanters who could use third-level magic. Bronze adventurers were generally equivalent to level 22 to 28 in Yggdrasil. They were equivalent to magic chanters who could use fourth-level magic. The highest level of steel adventurers were generally equivalent to level 29 and above in Yggdrasil. They were equivalent to magic chanters who could use fifth-level magic. Good Jiafu, who was known as the strongest warrior in the kingdom, was equivalent to a level 35 warrior. In other words, for the entire human race, level 35 was considered the limit. In fact, people who reached this limit were usually called heroes. Noah didn't know if there was anyone in this world who could break through this so-called limit of humans. Because, by the time the interrogation reached this point, the people who came from the Book of Sunshine were basically all dead. However, even if there were people who could break through this limit, since it was called a limit, it couldn't be easily surpassed. Therefore, Noah estimated that the people in this world, in terms of humans, even if there were people who could break through level 35, there would be no more than 10. In this way, Annabelle, who had reached level 63, was basically invincible among humans. As for Noah himself, even if he didn't use Authority, Demon Slayer, and Gate of Babylon, he could still compete with the strongest level 100 Guardian, Zaisha, who was the strongest in one-on-one combat. In a human city where the highest level was level 35, it was impossible for anything to happen. If it weren't for the fact that there weren't any guards, the Guardians would definitely make a big fuss. I wanted to run out alone. Noah smiled at Annabelle. So, I'll leave my safety to you, Annabelle. Don't let me down. Hearing this, Annabelle's heart warmed. She suddenly knelt on the ground on one knee, offering the highest level of courtesy to Noah, and spat out a strong and powerful voice. I will definitely protect the safety of the Supreme Sovereign with my life. Such a strong and powerful voice echoed in the surroundings, making the residents who were faintly paying attention to Annabelle show a shocked expression, and looked at Noah with a strange face. Then, a flurry of discussion and pointing fingers at Noah were directed at him. Noah's face was completely frozen. Looking at Annabelle, who didn't care about the surrounding gazes and knelt on one knee to offer her loyalty to him, the corners of Noah's eyes twitched. The scene of a girl who was unbelievably beautiful in all aspects kneeling on one knee to a man on the street was really too beautiful. At the very least, Noah's scalp was numb from the whispers and discussions around him. He quickly bent down, grabbed Annabelle's hand, and slipped away amidst Annabelle's exclamation. Elantir was the nearest city to the great underground tomb in Nasarek. Noah chose to come to this city for this reason. The main purpose of coming to this city was to obtain the money of this world, and see if it could be used to pay for the maintenance of the great underground tomb in Nasarek. So, in the best-case scenario, Noah hoped to be able to obtain a large amount of money to use in experiments. In view of this, the most effective way was, of course, to sell valuable treasures in exchange for a large amount of money. And the most valuable treasure was none other than a magical weapon that could unleash magical effects. So, Noah brought a dagger to the largest equipment store in Elantir. The shop owner, who was about 30 years old, took the dagger that was entirely green in color with trembling hands, and even his voice was trembling. Top quality. This is definitely a top quality item. Hearing this, Noah more or less muttered in his heart. The level of the equipment in this world could be seen from the level of power in this world. In order to avoid unnecessary trouble, Noah did not take out any divine weapon or legendary level equipment. He did not even dare to take out any holy relic equipment, and only took out a heritage-level dagger. In the end, it still amazed the owner of the largest equipment store in this important military city. However, this could more or less estimate the value of the equipment in this world. So, Noah pretended to be calm and suddenly smiled. This poison dagger has poison magic attached to it. As long as it grazes the skin, even a magical creature with great immunity to poison will die instantly. Unless one has achieved true immunity to poison, otherwise, whoever is grazed by it will die. I think the shop owner should be able to give me a good price, right? This is indeed a rather powerful magical weapon. The shop owner wiped the cold sweat on his forehead, and a trace of greed appeared in his eyes as he looked at the poison dagger. After hesitating for a while, he spoke tentatively. How about this? I'll buy it for 500 gold coins. What do you think? 500. Noah raised his eyebrows and said with a smile that was not a smile. I say, shop owner, don't tell me you want to bully me. Ha! The shop owner laughed dryly. The price can be discussed, it can be discussed. However, just as these words were spoken, a voice rang out. That dagger, let me see. Chapter 1181. That dagger, let me have a look. When such a voice echoed throughout the equipment store, a series of footsteps also entered the store. Noah was slightly startled. He turned his head and looked towards the entrance. Then, he was stunned again. This was because the three people who entered the store surprised Noah quite a bit. It was mainly in terms of appearance. The first person that entered Noah's sight was a big guy. One of them was rather thick and strong. He had a pair of thick arms, and the diameter of his neck was about the size of a young girl's thighs. His eyes were fierce like that of a ferocious beast, and he had short golden hair. He was a big guy who only cared about practicality. Of course, big guys weren't rare. Noah had seen quite a few of them. However, the bulging chest muscles that looked like they had been thoroughly forged told Noah that this big guy was a female. It was definitely Noah's first time seeing a woman with such a bulky body. Next to the big guy, as if to create a sharp contrast, there was a petite girl who looked like an 11 or 12-year-old child. The girl was wearing a pitch-black robe that covered her entire body. She also wore a strange mask with a vermilion gem embedded on her forehead. It completely covered her face, and only the part where her eyes were slightly cracked open. Other than that, nothing else could be seen. The reason why Noah knew that the other party was a young lady was because the long robe was sticking tightly to the other party's body under the blowing of the wind, allowing Noah to keenly discern a slender and graceful figure. As for the third person, it was the one who had just spoken. It was also a girl. She was wearing a pitch-black undergarment and standing in the shadows, as if she was going to blend into the surrounding darkness and disappear at any time. Her entire body carried an aura that was incompatible with the light. The appearance of these three extremely unique people stunned even Noah, let alone the shop owner. However, the shop owner noticed something else. On these three people who suddenly broke in, there was a metal plate hanging on each of them. A piece of sparkling metal plate that shone with a strange brilliance. Its whole body was like cold steel, but ordinary steel was absolutely incomparable to it. That kind of metal was called steel. Seeing the metal plate made of steel, the shop owner exclaimed out loud. Steel. Steel-level adventurer. Yes. Only adventurers would wear metal plates. And adventurers who wore metal plates made of steel were naturally the highest level of steel adventurers. Among the humans in this world, they were also the strongest. Annabelle almost subconsciously put her hand on the hilt of the long sword at her waist. In a flash, she rushed in front of Noah and cast her sharp eyes forward. The big woman suddenly reacted to this and took a step forward fiercely. In the bang sound of footsteps that made the ground tremble slightly, her ferocious beast-like eyes were also cast on Annabelle. From the oppressive force emerging from this big woman, coupled with that lean figure, I believe that even a brave man would be scared off, right? However, this pressure was like a gentle breeze to Annabelle. It was unable to cause even the slightest change in her expression. Her sharp eyes began to turn ice cold. This made the big woman a little surprised. A ferocious smile that absolutely matched her appearance appeared on her tough face. You're quite brave. As a woman, it's quite rare. And you're so beautiful that I can't bear to lay my hands on you. Hearing the words of the big woman, Annabelle just had a cold face. She looked at the other party as if she was looking at a dirty insect, and some murderous aura began to emerge from her body. However, before the murderous aura gushed out of Annabelle's body, Noah spoke. Step back, Annabelle. With one sentence, the murderous aura all over Annabelle disappeared without a trace at once. Her face also returned to the initial expressionless face. She slowly relaxed her body and retreated behind Noah. This scene finally made the three fine steel adventurers discover the existence of Noah. They also understood that the beautiful girl who confronted the fine steel adventurers fearlessly just now was following this person's lead. Ignoring the three fine steel adventurers in front of him, Noah nonchalantly took the poison dagger from the stunned shop owner and held it in front of him. Do you want to see this dagger? Noah's words made the girl who seemed to be about to blend into the shadows raise her head and look at the poison dagger. She made a flat, emotionless voice. Are you going to sell this dagger? If I wasn't selling it, I wouldn't have brought it here. Noah twirled the dagger in his hand as if he wasn't afraid of being cut by the poison magic on it. He shrugged. It's just that I'm not very satisfied with the price of the shop owner. If you want it, as long as you give me a satisfactory price, then it's yours. Suddenly, the girl's eyes were completely focused on the poison dagger. She couldn't shift her gaze away. After hearing Noah's words, the shop owner couldn't help but open his mouth as if he wanted to say something. But when he remembered that the person who wanted the poison dagger was the highest level fine steel adventurers in the kingdom, he immediately deflated and closed his mouth. At this time, the petite girl in the cloak raised her head slightly and spat out a voice. Tina, do you want that dagger? It was a voice that didn't have a specific age. At most, it could be barely determined that it was a girl, but it also seemed to be old. It was a somewhat deep and flat voice that didn't carry any emotions. You suddenly turned into this shop because you saw this dagger, right? The burly woman used her coarse voice to suppress the incredulous voice and said, "Don't you already have the vampiric blade? You don't need a weapon, right? I'm an assassin." The girl called Tina glanced at the large woman expressionlessly. "Even if you're interested in this dagger, there's nothing strange about it, right?" Gigrin. To put it simply, the girl called Tina wasn't interested in the poison dagger's preciousness, but its instant death effect. "That's true." The large woman called Gigrin nodded indifferently. "Anyway, we just happened to pass by this city. If we can gain something, then it's worth it." In Yelantir, there wasn't the highest level fine steel adventurers. In the kingdom known as Yestage, there were only 2 small teams that could reach the level of fine steel adventurers, and they weren't adventurers from Yelantir either. The fine steel adventurers in front of them were obviously a small team. It was also very obvious that they weren't adventurers from this city, but rather from another city. So, saying that they just happened to pass by should be correct. The girl called Tina nodded and looked at Noah. "I can buy your dagger for 1,000 gold coins, but I don't have that many gold coins on me. If you're willing, you can come with us to the Imperial City." "Go to the Imperial City?" Noah frowned slightly. "Kid, you won't lose out by coming all the way here for 1,000 gold coins, right?" Gigrin cracked a smile and said so. "If you're worried about being attacked by demons on the way, then there's no need for that. Come with us, I guarantee that there's nothing safer than this." Annabelle, who was waiting beside Noah, closed her eyes slightly and murmured without leaving a trace. A bunch of Turbolarians, obviously. In Annabelle's heart, Gigrin's words were overestimating his own abilities. Although the fine steel adventurers were at least level 29 powerhouses, with the level 63 Annabelle around, why would they need the protection of these people? In addition, Annabelle was an abnormal creature and looked down on humans just like Yael Bedard, so there was such a reaction. Fortunately, Gigrin and the others didn't hear it. Otherwise, they might have already fallen out with each other. The Imperial City. Noah couldn't help but think of the upright warrior captain. After pondering for a while, he nodded. "All right, I'll go with you." Gedjuf was the warrior captain of the kingdom. He believed that such an existence could provide Noah with a good way to earn money, right? Chapter 1182. After that, Noah found out that the 3 adventurers who wanted to buy the poison dagger from him belonged to one of the only 2 fine steel teams in the kingdom of Leastage, the Blue Rose. It was said that the leader of this fine steel team, named Blue Rose, was a noble of the kingdom. There were a total of 5 members in the team, and all of them were women. Although they were all women, in terms of strength, they were all among the top powerhouses of the human race. Otherwise, in the entire kingdom, there would not be only 2 teams that could reach the fine steel level. For such an existence to come to Yelantir where there were no fine steel adventurers, it was no doubt that they were the real center of attention. Therefore, as soon as they left the equipment store, the 3 fine steel adventurers went into the alley, leaving Noah with only one sentence. "Let's meet at the city gate. We will prepare the carriage." After leaving such a sentence, the 3 fine steel adventurers, who were very eye-catching in all aspects, disappeared into the alley. After the 3 of them had all left, Annabelle approached Noah slightly and spoke softly. "Sir Noah, do you really plan to go to the capital?" "Yes." Noah nodded without turning his head. "There, I should be able to find a way to make money easier." "But, is that okay?" Annabelle could not help but ask. "Don't you need to discuss it with Sir Yerbade first? You just need to inform Yerbade." Noah thought for a while and said, "Anyway, with message, we can keep in touch at any time. Even if something really happens, we can instantly teleport back to the big underground tomb in Nassarik. There's no need to worry too much." The last time, when Gudjifu invited Noah to the capital, Noah was already tempted. However, because the operation of the big underground tomb in Nasarick had not been officially opened, Noah did not accept Gudjifu's invitation. Now, the operation of the underground tomb in Nasarick was on track. With Yair Bird and Demiugos around, there was no need for Noah to personally take care of the management. Coupled with the most important issue of money, it was now necessary for him to make a trip to the royal capital. Understood. Yair Bade nodded obediently, then pressed a finger to his temple. Then, I'll report this matter to Lord Yair Bade first. Noah nodded absent-mindedly. His eyes were still staring at the place where the three fine steel adventurers from Blue Rose had left. His eyes narrowed slightly. There were only 2 steel tier squads in the kingdom. Even if the members of such an illustrious team were not as good as Gudjifu, they were not far behind, right? Of course, this was not the reason why Noah paid attention to the 3 adventurers from Wild Rose mercenary group. Noah was paying attention to the petite girl who had wrapped herself tightly in a black robe. Noah felt a strange aura from the girl. That aura was very strange. Noah had also sensed the same aura from Zaisha. However, that girl's aura was not as strong and valiant as Satya's. Vampire. Noah raised the corners of his mouth. Interesting. About 30 minutes later, Noah and Annabelle arrived at the city gate. There, a carriage had already been parked. Next to it, the 3 steel tier girls seemed to have been waiting there from the beginning. They seemed to be talking about something. When they noticed Noah's arrival, they turned their gazes to Noah one after another. Too slow, boy. Gigraine showed a ferocious beast-like smile to Noah. You actually dare to make me wait for you. You've got guts. Gigraine's rude words made some anger appear in Annabelle's eyes, and her gaze towards Gigraine was full of hostility. If Noah hadn't warned Annabelle in advance, she might have already launched an attack. And Gigraine obviously noticed Annabelle's hostile gaze. He raised his brows and looked at Noah. Is that your follower? She seems to be very capable. Gigraine wasn't mocking, but telling the truth. In the kingdom, Gigraine was also very famous. As the highest level of steel tier adventurer, Gigraine was definitely qualified to be called a hero. Facing a person who could be called a hero, to be able to display such blatant hostility in front of Gragland, that wasn't something that could be done casually. To put it bluntly, even Secret Silver and Orichalcum adventurers dared not confront Gigraine like this. Therefore, Gigraine didn't hate Annabelle. On the contrary, he admired her very much. It was just that he didn't know why such a beautiful and capable girl would be so obedient to a man. In this regard, Noah just smiled indifferently. Sort of. Is that so? Gigraine curled his lips. Well, it has nothing to do with me anyway. After saying such a sentence, Gigraine got into the carriage. His huge body caused the entire carriage to sink a little. It must be quite difficult for the horse to pull such a person, right? Then, Tina also got into the carriage. The remaining petite girl in a black cloak seemed to have glanced at Noah and Annabelle through the strange mask. After pausing on Noah for a while, she also got into the carriage. What a rude bunch of insects. Annabelle's voice became low and deep. How dare they get into the carriage before Sir Noah? Sir Noah, can you allow me to pull out their tongues and stuff them into their nostrils? No. Noah sighed. I forgot that the reason why I didn't go to the royal city last time was because I was worried that you guys would cause unnecessary trouble because of your hateful personalities. After saying that, Noah went forward with Annabelle as if he had a headache and also got into the carriage. Following the sound of a whip, the 2 horses in front let out a long neigh. Then, the carriage moved forward on the road. In the carriage, Gigraine, Tina, and the group of cloaked girls sat in a row. Noah and Annabelle sat opposite the 3 of them. Because they were only in a business relationship, both sides didn't talk and an indescribable silence enveloped the entire carriage. In this regard, no one present cared and didn't feel that there was anything wrong with the atmosphere. Needless to say, Tina and the group of cloaked girls weren't the kind of people who couldn't stand loneliness and silence from their voices and dressing. Annabelle didn't even have the slightest intention to talk to humans. Noah only supported his chin with one arm and looked out of the window. It seemed like he was just looking at the scenery, but in fact, he was silently memorizing the path. Noah didn't have a map of this world. Being able to reach Elantir was entirely due to the guidance of the residents of Cawn Village. The villagers of Cawn Village did provide Noah with a map, but the map wasn't very detailed. Therefore, Noah compared the map in his mind and after confirming that this road was indeed leading to the royal city, he turned his gaze back. And when he turned back, Noah noticed it. The cloaked girl seemed to be looking at Noah. Although the strange mask on her face didn't reveal her expression, Noah could still feel her gaze through the thin slits of her eyes. The others seemed to have noticed the cloaked girl's strange behavior and turned around one after another. "What's wrong?" "Herbie Rouet." Gigraine spoke without mincing his words. "Have you taken a fancy to this man? Want to sleep with him for a night?" This sentence directly caused the atmosphere in the carriage to become extremely strange. Annabelle clicked her tongue and looked at Gigraine and the others with a gaze that couldn't be described as unfriendly. She was really considering where to start. Tina didn't find it strange and directly closed her eyes and turned her head away. As for the cloaked girl called Herbie Rouet, her entire delicate body trembled slightly. Then, she turned her head and looked at Gigraine. "Brainless muscle girl, have you thought of men to this extent?" "I'm worried for you," Gigraine said nonchalantly. "After all, you didn't seem to be interested in men before." "Being interested doesn't mean that I'm thinking of men." Herbie Rouet was speechless. "So, you'd better shut up." As soon as he finished speaking, Noah suddenly smiled. "I don't mind." Chapter 1183. It doesn't matter to me. Noah's sudden words made everyone's expression slightly stiff. They were completely frozen at once. Including Gerland. Clearly, Gigran was just joking with Ebra with those words. After all, from Ebra's body shape, she was only equivalent to an 11 or 12-year-old girl. Under such circumstances, no matter what, Gerland wouldn't really think that seriously. And even Gerland was like this, not to mention Ebro as the person involved. Although no one could see Ebra's expression at this moment because of the mask. But the astonishment hidden under the mask was still vaguely noticed by everyone present. It was easy to imagine how much Noah's sudden words had shaken Ibilui. As for Annabelle, this combat maid's frosty face had long collapsed. She looked at Noah with the most astonished gaze she had ever seen before, stuttering as she spoke. How can such a lowly creature?" Before Annabelle could finish her sentence, Noah raised a hand and stopped her. Ignoring Gerland and Tina's astonishment, Noah looked straight at Ebru, smiled indifferently, and said such a sentence. "Can't help it. Who asked me to be interested in you?" Logically speaking, with the previous words as a foreshadowing, this sentence should sound full of a pink atmosphere. However, Noah's calm expression and half-smile eyes told everyone present that in his heart, he didn't really think in that direction. In that case, the meaning of Noah's words was quite worthy of further investigation. The way Gerland and Tina looked at Noah had completely changed. Ebra felt as if she was completely seen through under the gaze of that pair of dark and deep eyes, and a chill burst out of her heart. It was only at this moment that the three fine steel adventurers realized. Perhaps, this man Noah was very likely to be more complicated than Annabelle. Giglan stared at Noah, his muscles tensing up. "Who would have thought that there would be a time when I make a mistake? Elua is still the best, don't praise me, I didn't notice it either." Ibilua sneered. "It's just that my intuition tells me that this man is not simple." In contrast, Tina didn't say anything. Instead, she silently placed a hand behind her back before reaching into her waist. There must be a weapon there, right? Seeing that Ibaru, Jaren, and Tina were all on guard, Annabelle, who had calmed down, glared coldly at the three adventurers, causing the atmosphere in the carriage to become extremely sinister. However, this was something that could not be helped. From an adventurer's point of view, it was impossible not to be on guard against a seemingly harmless man who could hide from the eyes of a fine steel adventurer when he suddenly became a person who could pose a threat to them. I should have thought of that long ago. How can a person who can have a capable attendant be an ordinary person? Geglin smacked his lips and asked directly. Are you really only intending to make a deal with us? You don't have any other intentions, right? It's time for you to shut that stinky mouth of yours, woman. Annabelle finally couldn't hold back and glared coldly at Geglin. Mosquitoes like you aren't worthy of Master Noah's swatting hand. You should know how much weight you have. Are your eyes made of muscles too? Do you want me to help you train while I'm at it? Oh. Geglin narrowed his eyes, cracked his mouth, and laughed. It's been a long time since someone has spoken to me with such a tone. Not bad, I'm also very curious about how much weight you have. After saying that, Geglin leaned forward, as if intending to press his head against Annabelle's forehead, and laughed sinisterly. Get out of here. I'll train with you. Looking at Geglin's coarse face that was inches away from her, Annabelle frowned slightly as if some kind of insect had crawled up to her face. Finally, a look of disgust appeared in her eyes. And the emotion hidden deep under this disgust was a complete murderous intent. Annabelle had long been displeased with this group of inferior human creatures. If they were just crawling in front of her like ordinary insects, it wasn't impossible for her to pretend that she didn't see them. But this group of people had repeatedly disregarded the master that Annabelle respected the most in her heart. How could Annabelle not be angry? For Annabelle, if she didn't treat Noah like a servant, it would be disrespectful. And as long as it was someone who was disrespectful to Noah, they should be obliterated. With this thought in mind, Annabelle's hand slowly reached for the long sword at her waist. At this moment, Noah suddenly spoke. As a fine steel adventurer, you should also be an existence that the world calls a hero, right? Noah spoke without the slightest hint of nervousness, causing the tense atmosphere in the entire space to stagnate. Ignoring everyone's reaction, Noah's gaze swept across Ibaru, Tina, and Geglin in succession. Finally, he looked at Geglin. As far as I know, the kingdom's warrior Gejif Stolanov is also a character who has stepped into the realm of heroes. Compared to him, who is stronger? I thought you wanted to ask something. Geglin stared at Noah for a while, then pursed his lips and said disinterestedly. Listen carefully, kid. The so-called heroes refer to those who have surpassed the realm of humans and reached the limits of humans. They are monsters who have extraordinary talent. Although fine steel adventurers can also be considered heroes, they are still human. Geglin shot a glance at Ibaru and waved his hand in a seemingly nonchalant manner. So, I'm still an ordinary person who can't step into the realm of heroes. In other words, Geglin admitted that he couldn't compare to Gejif. However, that was also an answer that Noah expected. In terms of level, Gejif was equivalent to a level 35 warrior. As for fine steel adventurers, they could forget about level 29 and above. The difference between level 29 and level 35 didn't seem that big, but if they really fought, the winner would still be the latter in the end. That was the difference. What's wrong? Geglin looked at Noah strangely. Are you trying to say that if I can't reach Uncle Gejif's realm, then I can't defeat you? Annabelle snorted coldly. If I can't reach Gejif's realm, then I can't defeat Noah. Even if there were 10 more Gejifs, they wouldn't even be worthy of carrying the shoes of the supreme ruler of Nazarik's underground tomb. Although Annabelle didn't directly say these thoughts, her actions expressed everything, causing Giggling to glare fiercely at Annabelle. However, at this time, Noah seemed to understand what kind of people the three fine steel adventurers in front of him were, and nodded. Understood. Thank you for your answer. After saying this, Noah continued to look out the window as if nothing had happened. Seeing this, Annabelle had no choice but to close her eyes and remain silent. Eberui, Tina, and Giggling all glanced at one another in bewilderment. That's it. What's wrong, kid? Kid? Giggling asked in confusion. Aren't you going to fight me? This made Noah feel strange. Who said I'm going to fight you? You're not going to fight me. Giggling raised his eyebrows. Then what are you here for? I'd like to ask, why do you think I want to fight you? Noah asked calmly. I'm here to do business, not to fight. If you're itching for a fight, and my follower seems to want to try, I'll let her accompany you. Noah looked at Giggling and suddenly smiled. However, like I said, I'm here to do business. If you want to use my follower to practice, then 100 gold coins per minute, no bargaining. The corner of Giggling's mouth twitched. Not to mention Giggling, even Eberui and Tina were dumbfounded. Only Annabelle looked eager to try. If she could help Noah achieve his goal of making money, and also teach this annoying woman a lesson, it would be the best for Annabelle. And in this strange atmosphere, the carriage continued to move in the direction of the royal city without stopping. Chapter 1184. If one had to use a word to describe the kingdom's royal capital, then there was only one word that could fully express it. That was ancient. To put it nicely, this word meant that it had a long history. To put it bluntly, this word could also be used to describe the royal capital's antiquity. At least, that was how Noah felt. Unlike the brand new buildings in Elantir, most of the buildings in the royal capital were very old and rustic, without any novelty or novelty. On the ground, many of the roads had not been paved. On the streets, the pedestrians coming and going did not express the liveliness that a kingdom's royal capital should have. Here, it was as if everyone was on guard against something, as if they were afraid of something. Even if they were talking to each other, they did not dare to speak too loudly, causing the entire space to present a lifeless and heavy atmosphere. It was very depressing. If it were not for the guards patrolling the surroundings with spears in their hands, and the castle in the deepest part of the royal capital that could be seen even from afar, it was believed that no one would think that such a lifeless city was the kingdom's royal capital. In fact, Noah indeed had such doubts. Is this really the royal capital? Noah frowned slightly. It doesn't look like it at all. Have you never been to the royal capital? Giggling glanced at Noah. The expression on his face was not as carefree as before, but faintly revealed a kind of displeasure. This is also something that can't be helped. Although the royal capital's security is not bad compared to the other cities, this kingdom is not a place where people can live peacefully for the rest of their lives. It is already considered good that a large number of demons did not directly attack the city. Noah and Annabelle instantly looked at each other. At this point, it was necessary to mention the situation of the kingdom of Restige. Among the three kingdoms, the empire and the theocracy, the kingdom was undoubtedly the weakest. There was no other reason other than that this kingdom had hidden dangers that could not be ignored. Nobles. Simply put, in the kingdom, basically, all the nobles belonged to the kind of families that were rotten to the core. In the kingdom, the royal family owned 30% of the country's land, the nobles owned 40%, and the rest was privately owned. It was a feudal country. However, in such a feudal country, the royal family was always under the control of the aristocrats. For example, all the nobles in the kingdom were currently divided into two factions, the royal faction and the aristocratic faction. The royal faction naturally supported the current king and served the current king. The aristocratic party, on the other hand, was secretly opposing the royal party. After the current king abdicated, they intended to support the prince under their control to take over the throne and thus control the entire political power of the country. In addition, the empire had always been eyeing the kingdom covetously. With the constant war between the empire and the kingdom naturally became the weakest country. In other words, this country was gradually becoming corrupt due to the greed of a group of foolish nobles for political power and benefits. Who knows if we'll suddenly provoke those foolish nobles while we're walking on the road? Even if we bump into them, I reckon we'll either be beaten to death or have all of our wealth squeezed out of us, Gigland said in displeasure. This is how chaotic this country is. You should be content if you don't meet those nobles who have no choice but to resort to robbery in order to survive. After saying that, Gigland walked in a certain direction with a sullen look on his face. Clearly, Gigland's sullen attitude was not directed at Noah, but at those nobles. Although Ibilua and Tina didn't say anything, they didn't find Gigland's displeasure to be inappropriate in the slightest. They followed behind Gigland and walked forward. Our team leader should be waiting for us right now. Tina also left this sentence behind. That's why you should come with us. Noah shrugged nonchalantly. He brought along Annabelle, who was indifferent to everything around her, and followed behind the three fine steel adventurers as they walked forward together. Along the way, many people cast their gazes at Noah and the others, and whispered discussions broke out. It was difficult for three fine steel adventurers of the highest level to not attract attention when walking on the streets. Not to mention, these three adventurers of the fine steel rank all had their own unique appearances. In comparison, Annabelle, who was wearing a plain robe, not only looked very normal, but also had a stunning appearance, which made many people exclaim in surprise. In that case, as the only male in such a group, it was imaginable how much attention Noah would attract. Unfortunately, in the group, apart from Annabelle, the others were all used to this kind of situation. The only exception was Annabelle, who looked down on creatures like humans. She didn't care about the gazes of humans at all. Therefore, the group didn't react to this situation and continued to walk forward. Soon, a luxurious hotel that looked like a high-class restaurant with a spacious courtyard and stable enough to practice swordsmanship entered the group's eyes. That was a hotel specially provided for adventurers. No matter which country it was, as long as it was a city with an adventurers' guild and adventurers, there would basically be such a hotel. And this hotel in front of them was the most high-class adventurers' hotel in the royal capital. Only adventurers who were extremely confident in their abilities and could afford the high cost of accommodation would choose to come here. Gragland, Ibru, and Tina pushed open the door of the hotel and walked in. Noah and Annabelle, who followed behind the three, immediately saw the scene inside. It was a place that looked like a high-class bar or restaurant. The decor was rather high-end and the space was extremely spacious. However, there were very few guests inside, which showed how rare high-grade adventurers were. The door of such a hotel naturally wouldn't be opened often. And once it was opened, it meant the arrival of more or less famous adventurers. At this moment, curious gazes swarmed into the shop. When they saw the three adventurers at the fine steel level, they immediately lowered their voices subconsciously. Gragland, who didn't care about this situation at all, looked around. After a while, his gaze stopped at one of the corners of the shop, and he spat out a voice that was much louder than the surroundings. Leader and Tia are there. As soon as Gragland's voice fell, Noah's gaze also shifted in that direction. Then, Noah saw it. In the innermost corner of the shop, there were two people sitting around a round table. One of them was exactly the same as Tina, whether it was her hairstyle, figure, appearance, or temperament. It didn't take a genius to figure out that this was the Tia that Gerland was referring to, and they seemed to be twins. The other one was a young girl. She had green eyes, pink lips, and a different kind of charm. She was about 17 or 18 years old, with a head of beautiful blonde hair and a relatively unique face. Agnes Elba Drew Eidolon. She was a noble of the kingdom and the leader of one of the only two fine steel adventurers in the kingdom. When she heard Gragland's voice, she had already cast her gaze over. After sweeping a glance at Noah and the others, she immediately fixed her gaze on Noah and Annabelle. Leader. Gragland walked over casually as if he didn't see anything and sat down. We're back. We're back. Ibilua and Tina also greeted one another before sitting down as well. Welcome back. The young girl named Tia raised her hand. Welcome back. Agnes also said the same, but her gaze was still fixed on Noah and Annabelle. These two are the people we met in Ylantir. Gragland pointed at Tina. Tina wants to buy a dagger from them. That's right, Tina replied in a concise manner. But I don't have that much money on me. A hint of realization appeared on Hagrid's face upon hearing this, and a curious look appeared on T's face. What dagger? Tina didn't say anything. Instead, she took out the poison dagger and placed it on the table. Chapter 1185. When the emerald green dagger with a frightening silver glow appeared in front of the fine steel adventurers, even Hagrid's eyes lit up. Since even Haggis was acting like this, Tia, who was also an assassin like Tina, reached out her hand and picked up the poison dagger from the table. She looked at it carefully and spun it around a few times in an extremely nimble manner. Then, she made a sound. This is good stuff. Logically speaking, a fine steel adventurer's equipment could only be of a high level. Therefore, the adventurers belonging to the fine steel level team called Blue Rose had already seen a lot of good quality equipment. They even had excellent equipment themselves. If even a fine steel adventurer said that the poison dagger was a good item, then the value of this dagger could only be imagined. Of course, to Noah, this was just an heritage-grade dagger, which was equivalent to an E-grade weapon. But to the people of this world, an heritage-grade weapon was equivalent to an E-grade weapon. It could already be considered as the best. I want it too. Tina could not help but look at Noah. Do you have another dagger like this? Hearing this, Noah smiled slightly and quietly reached one hand behind his back. In a corner where no one could see, Noah's hand behind his back slightly fluctuated with an obscure magical wave. Along with the obscure magical wave, a ray of light flashed in Noah's palm. The next moment, the light turned into a dagger. A dagger that was emerald green in color. Other than the poison dagger, what else could it be? Noah put the freshly made dagger on the table and said heartily. Coincidentally, I have another one. This sentence was obviously a lie. As long as Noah was willing, then he could make countless poison daggers. This was because Noah had a spell called Weapon Refinement. Weapon Refinement, steel-making magic, duplicate, refine, and forge weapons, replicated, refined, and forged weapons will be weakened to a certain extent depending on the level, performance, and ability of the weapon. Replicating, refining, and forging weapons will depend on the weapon's level, performance, and ability to maintain the weapon for a certain period of time. This spell was called Weapon Refinement. It could create any weapon that Noah needed. As long as it belongs to the category of a weapon, Noah can create it out of thin air. The weapons produced would be weakened to a certain extent and exist for a certain period of time according to the weapon's level, performance, and ability. In other words, as long as the weapon's level, performance, and ability were not high, the weapons created by Noah would not be weakened, and their existence would be cancelled. Coincidentally, the legacy weapon called the poison dagger was only equivalent to a grade E relic, and its ability was only enhanced with a poison spell. For a weapon of this level, Noah could casually create it with the magic of Weapon Refinement, and it would neither weaken nor disappear. Unaware of this, Tia happily picked up the other poison dagger and said without giving him an explanation. Then I'll buy this one. Good lad. Gerland looked at Noah in surprise. You actually have a hidden weapon? Don't tell me you have something else. Noah did not answer Gerland's question. Instead, he spread his hands and looked at Tia. Miss Tina spent 1,000 gold coins to buy this poison dagger. Oh. Tia was startled. After hesitating for a moment, she said. In other words, we have to pay you 2,000 gold coins. That's right. Noah's lips curled up. How about it? Can the two of you afford it? Tina and Tia looked at each other and immediately looked at Hagrid. Although 2,000 gold coins seemed like a small amount, it was actually quite a large sum. For example, the taxes that the nobles in the kingdom collected from all the citizens in their territories, apart from the nobles who were quite powerful, would be around this amount in a month. In fact, some of the weaker nobles with smaller territories would not even be able to collect this amount in a month. As members of one of the only two fine steel adventurers in the kingdom, Tina and Tia had the means to come up with this sum of money. However, such a large sum of money was definitely not something they could carry around with them. Apart from being a fine steel adventurer, Hagrid was also a noble of the kingdom. Hagrid shook her head helplessly when she felt Tina and Tia's gazes. Then, she smiled sweetly. That's fine too. With these 2 daggers, Tina and Tia's strength will increase again. I'll pay for this for the time being. After saying that, Agagi untied a leather pouch from her waist, opened the pouch, and took out a gold coin from it. No. That was not a gold coin. This was because it was not a dazzling gold. Instead, it was similar to silver. It shone with a dazzling light, and its color was even more dazzling than normal silver. This was a platinum coin. It was 10 times more valuable than a gold coin. A platinum coin was equivalent to 10 gold coins in the general currency. Hagrid took out 200 platinum coins and put them in another leather pouch before handing it to Noah. 200 platinum coins is equivalent to 2,000 gold coins, right? Platinum coins. Noah thought for a while and nodded. That's right. I'll take it then. Although he did not know if the platinum coins could be used to pay for the maintenance of the underground tomb in Nasarick, if they could be used, they might be worth more than gold coins. Even if they could not be used, they could still be exchanged for gold coins elsewhere. Therefore, for Noah, it was not a bad idea. Thus, Noah reached out and grabbed the leather pouch that Hagrid handed to him. However, when Noah wanted to take the leather pouch, he realized that Hagrid was not looking at him. Hagrid did not let go of the leather pouch. A pair of green eyes stared straight at Noah, and Hagrid asked with a smile. By the way, I haven't asked your name yet. Noah raised his eyebrows and looked at Hagrid's smiling face. After a while, he spoke indifferently. Just call me Noah. Hearing these words, Annabelle raised her eyebrows and opened her mouth slightly. She seemed to want to say something, but in the end, she suppressed it. However, even so, there was still a trace of resentment in Annabelle's eyes. That was Annabelle's displeasure at the fact that humans, as inferior creatures, called the supreme ruler of the underground tomb in Nasarick by his name. What Annabelle didn't know was that, in fact, Haggis had been observing this good-looking girl who was silently following behind Noah. Therefore, the fleeting resentment in Annabelle's eyes made Hagrid's eyes flicker slightly. However, Hagrid did not notice it either. In front of her, Noah also clearly saw the undulating waves in the pair of green eyes. At that moment, Noah's eyes had a little thought-provoking look, and he said such a sentence. Then, can you please let go of your hand? Oh, I'm really sorry. Hagrid let go of the leather pouch without the slightest apology and chuckled at Noah. Mr. Noah's companion is really beautiful. I have only seen one person with beauty comparable to your companion in my life, so I'm a little curious about your origin. At this moment, except for Hagrid, Abirua, Gorglant, Tina, and Tia all exchanged a look and understood everything in an instant. This was the tacit understanding that could only be cultivated by going through life and death together all year round. It was this tacit understanding that made Hagrid notice something from the performance of Aberua and others, and she began to pay attention to Noah and Annabel. And the more she looked, the more Hagrid couldn't see through Noah and Annabel. In this way, if Hagrid still didn't understand that Noah and Annabel were not simple, then the title of Fine Steel Adventure could really be thrown away. In this regard, Noah just put away the leather pouch full of platinum coins into his arms, and then smiled at Hagrid. On the way here, I also talked to your teammates, Mississippi. Noah glanced at Aberua and said with a faint smile. I'm also very curious about the origin of one of your teammates. The group of Fine Steel adventurers suddenly narrowed their eyes. Chapter 1186. Rouet was an undead. To be more precise, he was a vampire among the undead. The number of people who knew about this was very few. However, as Rouet's companions, it was impossible for Haggis and the others not to know the true origin of Rouet. In order to prevent anyone from noticing him, Rouet even used a black robe to cover himself tightly, and even wore a mask. However, Noah's interest in Rouet was clear to everyone present. This man who came to sell weapons saw through Rouet's origin. Understanding this, led by Haggis, Rouet, Glenn, Tina, and Tia all silently raised their vigilance. This was especially true for Rouet. On his mask, his eyes seemed to flash with a red light, making everyone present feel a trace of blood in that instant. What was an undead? From a conceptual point of view, those individuals who were born from the dead and possessed immortal life were called immortals. There were many types of undead. For example, zombies and skeletons were the most common type of undead. Similarly, vampires were also a type of undead. And because the undead were basically individuals born from the dead, under normal circumstances, the undead were the kind of existence that hated life. For the undying, things like taking away life were already an instinctive nature. However, there were exceptions to everything. Among some intellectual undead, there were also some who could suppress their hatred for life and establish interpersonal relationships with the living. For example, Satya, the true ancestor of vampires, never showed this kind of instinctive hatred for Noah. Of course, Noah was the supreme ruler of the underground tomb in Nasarick, but it also meant that Satya could control her hatred for life very well. Otherwise, Satya wouldn't have offered the highest level of loyalty to Noah. Rouet was obviously such an undead. Noah was interested in Rouet for two reasons. First, it was because he could feel that this Lolita vampire was not as simple as she seemed. Being able to integrate into human society so well proved that Rouet was definitely not the kind of low-level undead that would be devoured by instinct and not have high intelligence. At least, in Noah's view, this lowly vampire was definitely much higher than the so-called Fine Steel adventurers in terms of level. Preliminary judgment, it was estimated that she was around level 50. So, even if Gudjifu stepped into the hero realm, if Rouet was serious, she could kill him in one move. Seeing that the group of Fine Steel adventurers showed a vigilant attitude towards him, Noah smiled bitterly. Okay, everyone, you don't need to be so vigilant against me. I'm just interested because I have a companion like Ms. Rouet. The same. Led by Haggis, the group of Fine Steel adventurers were stunned. Same. Rouet was also stunned on the spot. Even if her expression could not be seen, it was still obvious how shocked she was. Only Annabel frowned and couldn't help but speak. I think that Lady Satya is much nobler than her. Wasn't that right? In terms of race, Satya was the true ancestor of vampires. In terms of status, Zaisha was the strongest one among the guardians of the underground tomb in Nasarick. And in terms of level, Satya was the maximum level of 100. Compared to Satya, Rouet was undoubtedly more than one level lower. However, Verbi Rouet, who didn't know this, was a little annoyed. Is that so? Verbi Rouet said so. Then, if there is a chance, you must let me see the Satya you were talking about. Yes. Noah smiled perfunctorily. There will be a chance. Everyone present saw that Noah was perfunctory. However, everyone's vigilance was slightly relaxed. Judging from Noah and Annabelle's performance, there should be no mistake that there was a vampire as their companion. Since that was the case, as people who also had vampire companions, the group of elite steel-level adventurers were against Noah and looked at him in a new light. After all, the undead were destined to stand on the opposite side of humans because of their hatred for life. People who could understand each other without racial views could still win the favor of some open and above-board people. However, he had a follower, an undead as a companion, and could casually take out two extremely precious magic weapons. What was the origin of this man in front of them? It had to be said that the group of fine steel adventurers led by Haggis were really curious. At this moment, on the street outside, a commotion suddenly sounded and reached the ears of all the adventurers in the hotel. Noah's heart skipped a beat. Because, from the commotion, Noah heard a lot of footsteps that sounded like steel hitting the ground. It was the sound of iron boots hitting the ground. Moreover, the number of footsteps was quite large. In the hotel, the group of adventurers also heard these sounds clearly and immediately began to talk about it. Listening to these footsteps, it should be soldiers or guards, right? With such a large number of soldiers or guards dispatched, did something happen again? Who knows? Maybe it's those nobles who like to play tricks and take out their private soldiers to show off. That's right. The group of adventurers had such a conversation while their faces were more or less filled with disgust. It seemed that in the kingdom, the nobles were really disliked. Especially in the capital where the nobles were mostly, it was even more so. As a member of the nobles, Haggis could only smile bitterly at this situation, but there was nothing she could do. After all, there were quite a lot of corrupt nobles in the kingdom. Even Haggis had to admit this point, right? Of course, admitting it did not mean that Haggis would sit back and do nothing. At this moment, Haggis stood up directly and looked around at the members of the Wild Rose. Let's go out and have a look. Except for Haggis, the other 4 members of the Wild Rose nodded without any objection and stood up. Mr. Noah. Haggis looked at Noah and said, "Do you want to go with us to have a look?" "All right." Noah pondered for a moment, then nodded. "I have someone I want to find. If I follow you, it may be easier to find him." After that, Noah took Annabelle and walked out of the hotel with the adventurers of the Wild Rose. However, just as they walked out of the hotel and entered the street, the commotion suddenly expanded. On the street, because of the commotion just now, all the residents disappeared. They should have seen that the situation was not good and directly fled. On such a vast street, a group of guards with long swords and spears were surrounding a group of people who looked like outlaws. No. It should be said that there was a fight going on. Those outlaws were all more or less equipped with some weapons in their hands, and they fought fiercely with the surrounding guards. In the fight, the guards who surrounded the group of outlaws seemed to be a little timid. They did not look like well-trained warriors at all. Instead, they looked like strong ordinary people who were forced to do something beyond their abilities. In fact, this was indeed the correct perception. Unlike the soldiers who protected the king's city, the guards who patrolled the king's city were promoted from the civilians and did not have sufficient training. They were just a group of ordinary people who knew how to use weapons. Now, facing a group of fierce outlaws, these guards were naturally afraid. Many of them could not even hold their weapons steadily. Under such circumstances, the group of outlaws rushed out. "Get out of my way." A guy who looked like the leader directly kicked away a guard who screamed a little exaggeratedly, and rushed directly in the direction of Noah and his companions with his companions. Not knowing if it was because they were in a frenzy, this group of outlaws did not even find the metal cards of a group of fine steel adventurers. They rushed up with a ferocious face. "Those who block the way, die." Roaring such a sentence, the guy who looked like the leader was the first to rush out of the crowd. The blood-stained sword in his hand suddenly slashed out, cutting the air, and mercilessly falling on the head of the person in front of him. That person was Noah. Chapter 1187. Swish. Just like that, the sword that carried the smell of blood slashed down towards Noah's head. From the looks of it, he had no intention of showing any mercy. Seeing this scene, many of the guards even cried out in surprise. It was as if they could already see the scene of Noah's head being cleaved into two by this sword. However, as the person in question, Noah merely looked at the sword that was slashing down at his head, and there was not the slightest change in his expression at all. It wasn't just Noah. Even the fine steel adventurers of Wild Rose didn't react to this situation. They just looked at the outlaw who was slashing at Noah with a calm expression. Obviously, no one thought that Noah would be injured in such a situation. Including Annabelle. However, that was just that. Even though she knew that these ants couldn't even harm a single hair on Noah's body, Annabelle still couldn't stand by and watch these lowly human beings attack the supreme ruler of Nazarik's underground tomb. Lightning strike. When this cold voice echoed in the surroundings, a dazzling bolt of lightning suddenly streaked across the space behind Noah, landing on the outlaw who was about to slash his sword at Noah's head. Bang! Along with the sound of an explosion, dazzling thunderbolts directly exploded on the outlaw's body, turning into chaotic electric snakes that covered the outlaw's entire body. Beep, beep, beep. Ah! The sound of electric currents colliding and the mournful screams resounded through the entire space at the same time, instantly attracting the attention of everyone present. Not long after, the outlaw whose body was covered in lightning snakes became charred black. His body emitted a burnt smell and his eyes rolled back. He maintained his posture of raising his sword to chop Noah's head as he slowly fell to the ground. The outlaws who rushed out with him all stopped in their tracks and looked behind Noah in horror. Over there, Annabelle raised a finger to the front. There were still flashes of lightning on the finger, telling everyone present who had launched the lightning strike just now. M.O. Magic Chanter. And he's a third-ranked magic caster. Damn it. All the outlaws fell into a state of panic. The spell named Lightning Strike was indeed a third-ranked spell. Being able to use third-order magic proved that Annabelle was at least a platinum-level adventurer. An expert of this level was definitely not in existence that those outlaws who only knew how to wield their swords could match. Thus, those outlaws all panicked. The cowering guards were overjoyed. Only the fine steel adventurers from the Blue Rose mercenary group still had the same expression. As the highest-level elite steel-tier adventurers, only a spellcaster who could cast 5th-tier spells could match them. And because of their previous impression, the group of fine steel adventurers from Blue Rose did not think that Annabelle was just a spellcaster who could cast third-ranked spells. So, this level was not enough to surprise Hagrid and the others. Lord Noah. Annabelle slowly retracted her finger flashing with lightning and said expressionlessly. Shouldn't we let these stinking ants who dared to attack you go to hell to repent? Hearing Annabelle's emotionless voice, a chill ran down the backs of everyone present. At this moment, no one had any reason to believe it. As long as Noah nodded gently, then none of those outlaws would be able to survive. Wait! In the crowd of outlaws, a person shouted. We surrender. After saying that, that person directly threw down the weapon in his hand and raised his hand with a frightened look. All of a sudden, it was as if a chain reaction had been set off, causing the outlaws to cry out one by one. Surrender. We surrender. Don't kill us. Without any hesitation, those outlaws threw down the weapons in their hands one after another, raised their hands, and did not even dare to move. Seeing this, Noah scratched his cheek and looked at Hagrid. Hagrid immediately understood, took a step forward, looked at the guards, and said loudly, "Why aren't you suppressing them?" Only then did the surrounding guards react, hurriedly stepped forward, and subdued the outlaws who abandoned their weapons and surrendered one by one. It was not known if every world was like this, but those who were really responsible for law enforcement always appeared after the matter was resolved. When the guards at the scene had suppressed all of the outlaws, a group of soldiers wearing neat equipment under the lead of a person rushed over amidst a flurry of loud and chaotic footsteps. Moreover, the person in the lead was someone Noah knew. "Oh." Gigrin grinned. "Isn't that Uncle Gujifu?" "Yes." The person who came was the kingdom's warrior captain, known as the kingdom's strongest warrior, Gujifu. "Even the warrior captains have been mobilized?" Hagrid looked at the outlaws thoughtfully. "It seems that these guys are not ordinary thieves." Noah also heard Hagrid's words. However, Noah had no interest in what kind of people those outlaws were. At this time, Noah's gaze was already cast on Gujifu who led the troops, and his eyes lit up slightly. Just as he was about to look for this warrior captain appeared. It really came at the right time. On the other side, Gujifu also noticed the group of fine steel adventurers of the Blue Rose, and also noticed Noah who was looking at him. At that moment, Gujifu was stunned at first, then his face lit up with joy. He raised a hand, and ordered the surrounding warriors who were under him. "All of you, go and help." Under Gujifu's lead, the warriors who came here all responded, and then spread out to help the guards and suppress those outlaws. Then, Gujifu put one hand on the sword at his waist, and walked in front of Noah with his head held high. "Sir Dole." The first thing Gujifu did was to greet Noah, and one could see that his face was full of joy. "I am very happy that you could come." Gujifu's words stunned Hagrid and the others, and then they were surprised. "What?" Hagrid couldn't wait to ask. "Do you know Mr. Noah, warrior captain?" "Yes." Gujifu was obviously acquainted with Agagi, so he nodded happily. "Not long ago, the king sent me to the border to carry out a mission, and I met Sir Noah Dole there. Sir is quite a powerful man, and I also invited Sir to come to the capital, but at that time, I was rejected by Sir." "Powerful man?" Gigrin asked directly. "How powerful?" Gujifu pondered for a moment, and then said so. "At least, he should be stronger than me." The group of fine steel adventurers all felt suffocated. Stronger than Gujifu. In other words, at least a powerful man who had stepped into the realm of heroes. "Sir Dole has come to the capital, please allow me to receive you." Gujifu said happily. "I believe that His Majesty will be very willing to receive you." Hearing this, Noah shook his head and looked at Gujifu. "I came to the capital because I have something to ask of you, warrior captain, and not to see the king." "Something to ask of me?" Gujifu was slightly startled. Even the fine steel adventurers of Wild Rose looked at each other and laughed bitterly. It turned out that Noah didn't come to the royal city just to sell 2 daggers. But that was also true. To have a magician who could at least cast 3rd-tier magic as a follower, and to be said by the strongest warrior of the kingdom to be inferior to him. How could such an existence simply come to the royal city to do a simple business deal? Of course, Noah really only came to the royal city to do business. But it was not a small business, but a large one. Although Gujifu didn't know what Noah's purpose was, he still felt a little disappointed knowing that he didn't come to seek refuge with the kingdom. Of course, disappointment was disappointment, but Gujifu wouldn't neglect Noah because of this. "Anyway, let's talk somewhere else first." Noah naturally didn't have any objections, and directly nodded. Chapter 1188. While Noah was in action in the royal city, the underground tomb of Nassarik was operating as usual. Sigh. In a meeting room, Yair Bedard, who was the head of the Guardians, sighed faintly with a listless attitude that she usually didn't have at work. Hearing Yair Bedard's sigh, all the people present stopped their discussion, and more or less showed annoyance on their faces. It was obvious that Yair Bedard had been in this state for a long time. Yair Bedard, are you still not awake? Demiurgos pushed the glasses on his face and sighed as well. As the head of the Guardians, we will not approve of such an attitude when all the Guardians are having a meeting. Taking a closer look, all the Guardians in the underground tomb of Nassarik were gathered except for the Guardians on the 4th and 8th floors. This was a Guardian meeting that would be held almost every once in a while since the management and operation of the underground tomb of Nassarik began. The purpose was naturally to gather the opinions and results of the Guardians on the various floors on the management and operation of the underground tomb of Nassarik before making better arrangements. Usually, the Guardians would gather together for a meeting every once in a while like today. After the results of the discussion were out, Yair Bedard would be responsible for bringing the results to Noah and report to Noah. Then, he would bring back the instructions from Noah. Now, Noah was not in the underground tomb of Nassarik. As the head of the Guardians, Yair Bedard was in charge of all kinds of matters in Nassarik. He would replace Noah in managing the underground tomb of Nassarik. Under such circumstances, it was no wonder that the Guardians would have objections to this agent being so listless. It was not only because Yair Bedard, as the head of the Guardians, should not have such an attitude. It was also because as Noah's agent, this person who got the job that all the Guardians dreamed of working with such an attitude was simply disrespectful to Noah. If they did not know the reason for Yair Bedard's listless performance, the Guardians would have already made things difficult for him. Of course, even if they didn't make things difficult for him, there would still be dissatisfaction. As the representative of the Honorable Supreme, you really shouldn't have such an attitude, Cosset said in a low voice. Shouldn't you feel honored to be able to work for the Honorable Supreme? That's right, Yawad said in a bored tone. If I had known this would happen, I would have let Demiurgos do it. Big sister, you're being too rude. Malay weakly tugged at All's clothes and then looked at Yair Bedard, revealing a delicate smile that a boy shouldn't have. Please keep your spirits up. Serves you right. Siataya held a nail clipper and curled her lips as she trimmed her nails. Who told her to seduce Lord Noah? Isn't it a given that you'll be rejected? That was right. The reason why Yair Bedard was so depressed was because the seduction plan had failed a while ago. With Siataya poking at his sore spot, Yair Bedard's beautiful face twisted to a degree that an ordinary lady would never have. Yair Bedard immediately looked at Siataya with a cold smile. At the very least, I still have a chance to seduce Lord Noah. Compared to a vampire who can only stay in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd floors all day long and can't even see Lord Noah's face. I can only hide in my room and deal with vampires by myself. This time, it was Siataya's turn to be poked at her sore spot. The corners of her mouth twitched and her face twisted. No matter how one looked at the two of them, they were the highest level of beauty. Their beautiful faces were twisted to a degree that would frighten an ordinary man, causing the timid Malay to shrink his head. Don't be too happy. Siataya's face twitched as she looked at Yair Bedard. The smile on her face was as ugly as it could be. I just didn't have the chance. Once I had the chance, I would have succeeded in one fell swoop. I definitely wouldn't be like you and scare Lord Noah away. Who did you say scared Lord Noah away? Yair Bedard was agitated. Lord Noah just felt that at this important moment when the underground tomb of Nassarik is officially in operation, he can't focus on personal relationships. He's so kind that he couldn't bear to reject me, so he chose to run away. Even if Lord Noah is kind, it can't hide your failure. Xiaotaya puffed up her voluptuous breasts that didn't match her age and said proudly. After this period of time passes, the kind Lord Noah will finally be able to get away from his busy work. I won't have to look after the first, second, and third floors all the time. Then, I can be intimate with Lord Noah. As she said this, Xiaotaya's beautiful face turned red and her expression became extremely flirtatious. That look was enough to make any man go crazy and lose his mind. However, the words that came out of the mouth of such a seductive girl made people speechless. I wonder if Lord Noah will love me as fiercely as he did in the throne room. Xiaotaya looked as if she was enduring something and felt very uncomfortable. If Lord Noah can whip me as fiercely as he did back then, how great would that be? Seeing Shadia reveal the standard masochist's dazed expression after being ravaged, Yal, Mare, Cossets, and Demiurgos were all speechless. TSK, Yair Beda was speechless. Damn masochist. Ha! Xiaotaya's expression stiffened, and she returned to her original state as she glared at Yair Beda. Filthy slut. Who are you calling a filthy slut? Yair Beda glared at Xiaotaya. I keep my body clean every day for Lord Noah, and I'm ready to give my first time at any time. Am I not? Xiaotaya glared at Yair Beda as well. I take care of my skin every day for Lord Noah, and I'm looking forward to seeing Lord Noah leave whip marks on it. Suddenly, the two extremely beautiful girls started an argument that seemed to have no bottom line. If Noah was here and heard the conversation between Yair Beda and Xiaotaya, he might really be scared away and not dare to come back. Yair Beda, Mare, Cossets, and Demiurgos could only look at each other and sigh helplessly. Just as everyone felt that they should stop it, the door suddenly opened. Sebastian, who was wearing a butler's uniform, walked in from outside. As soon as he came in, he spoke to everyone present. Guardians, Khan village has welcomed an uninvited guest. That one sentence silenced everyone present. They're finally here. Demiurgos suddenly smiled. As expected, Lord Noah guessed correctly. In order to not let the resurrection cause unnecessary trouble, Noah had asked Yair Beda and Mare to modify part of the memories of the residents of Khan village so that the resurrection would disappear. However, apart from the matter of the resurrection, there was another matter that couldn't be hidden. That was the disappearance of the Sunshine Scripture. Sebastian. Yair Beda's expression also became serious as he asked. Is it the people of the Celian theocracy? I'm not sure, but it shouldn't be wrong. Sebastian answered truthfully. Right now, they are investigating a place not far from Khan village. That is where Lord Noah and Lord Yair Beda took care of the Sunshine Scripture, people. Thank you for your hard work, Sebastian. Yair Beda nodded and looked at all the guardians present. Then, since the people of the Celian theocracy have appeared as Lord Noah predicted, then we should follow Lord Noah's instructions and take them all down. Let's see if we can use them as a means to negotiate with the theocracy. Is it finally time for me to appear? Xiaotaya revealed a seductive smile and stood up. Let me carry out Lord Noah's instructions. The guardians nodded in agreement. If Xiaotaya, who was the strongest in one-on-one combat among the guardians, were to take action, it would be guaranteed that nothing would go wrong. Unfortunately, the heavens did not listen to their wishes. Chapter 1189. Noah, who was far away in the capital, naturally did not know about what happened in the underground tomb of Nasaric. It was not that Yair Beda and the rest did not report to Noah using message. Instead, Noah had already instructed that as long as the people from the Syrian cult kingdom came to investigate, they were to be taken down and used as a means to negotiate with the Syrian cult kingdom. And the content of the negotiation was naturally about the magic sealing crystal. According to the information obtained from the Sunlight Scripture, Noah knew that in this world, only the people from the Syrian cult kingdom could use the magic sealing crystal. That was the most precious treasure of the Syrian cult kingdom, and only the higher-ups of the Syrian cult kingdom could have it. Other than the Syrian cult kingdom, no one else had the magic sealing crystal. And it was said that the magic sealing crystal seemed to be a treasure left behind by the 6 great gods who had descended into this world a few hundred years ago and became the religion of the Syrian cult kingdom. How could the 6 great gods have the magical equipment in Yggdrasil? This was what Noah wanted to know. For this matter, Noah had to prepare a means to negotiate with the Syrian cult kingdom. In the process of interrogating the information, the Sunlight Scripture, one of the special intelligence forces of the Syrian cult kingdom, had already been wiped out. It was not worth it to use the resurrection tool for these people. So, after Noah concluded that the disappearance of the Sunlight Scripture would definitely attract the attention of the Syrian cult kingdom who had been monitoring the Sunlight Scripture with the intelligence magic and would most likely send people over, he simply let Sebastian hide in Khan village and wait for the arrival of the people from the Syrian cult kingdom. And once the other party sent people over, by then, he would take them down and use them as a means to negotiate with the Syrian cult kingdom. Now that everything had been arranged, there was naturally no need to report all the time. So, Noah still stayed in the capital and carried out his money-making plan. In this aspect, Noah had also thought it through. As mentioned earlier, in this world, according to the different abilities of the adventurers, they would wear metals of different hardness and preciousness. The rarity of these metals, from low to high, were copper, iron, silver, gold, platinum, mithril, orichalcum, and stainless steel, a total of 8 kinds. In other words, in this world, on the surface, steel was the hardest and most precious metal. Some of the very high-level armaments were basically refined using stainless steel. For example, the equipment of the fine steel adventurers of the Blue Rose Guild was mostly made of fine steel. In Noah's treasure vault, there was also a metal like steel. The reason why there were these metals was because stainless steel was a type of metal that had a very good circulation of mana. In many magic and magic rituals, steel was often used as a catalyst and medium, as well as a base for the construction of magic arrays. It played the role of guiding magic power. Back then, when Gaia and Aleia were preparing the Gate of Babylon, they had stuffed everything that could help Noah into it. Because of this, Noah's Gate of Babylon naturally had this type of metal. In addition, these metals were used as catalysts and mediums for large-scale rituals. Noah's Gate of Babylon also treated these metals as consumables. In other words, these metals could also be replenished automatically. With this condition, Noah had an unlimited supply of stainless steel, which was used by countless people in this world as a source of high-level equipment. Thus, selling large amounts of stainless steel was undoubtedly a very profitable thing. Unfortunately, due to the preciousness of stainless steel, not everyone could consume large amounts of it. Therefore, Noah needed the kingdom's warrior captain Gudjefu to act as a middleman and provide him with a channel to sell large amounts of stainless steel. Gudjefu did not disappoint Noah. In the name of the warrior captain, this guy introduced Noah to many capable merchants. With the kingdom's warrior captain as a guarantor, these merchants naturally did not worry about Noah playing any tricks. Thus, Noah established a business relationship with these merchants. Of course, considering that the appearance of large amounts of stainless steel would cause problems in the market, Noah did not sell too much. Even so, with the extremely precious stainless steel as a trade item, Noah still made a huge profit. If this world's money could really be used to maintain the underground tomb in Nasarek, then this channel would become a very important source of funds for Nasarek. If not, then this world's money could be used to purchase other materials that could be used to create equipment, items, and other items. This channel was also very important. Thus, Noah did his best to establish a friendly relationship with these merchants to ensure that this channel would not have any problems. When all this was done, Noah did not even have time to rent a hotel. He could only stay in the kingdom's warrior captain's mansion under Gudjefu's hospitality. As for the group of Grey Rose's adventurers, naturally they would not all stay in Gudjefu's house, but they seemed to be curious about Noah. Come to think of it, there should be a lot of dealings with these adventurers in the future, right? The next day, Noah cleared away the accumulated fatigue from yesterday and slowly woke up from his sleep. Outside the window, the dazzling sunlight spilled into the room and hit Noah's face. When Noah opened his eyes, he was slightly dazzled. He squinted slightly, then propped up his upper body and yawned. As soon as he woke up, Annabelle's voice was transmitted to Noah's ears. "Good morning, Lord Noah." Hearing Annabelle's voice, Noah seemed to remember something. He turned his head and looked aside. He saw that in the corner of the room, Annabelle, who was wearing the same robe as yesterday, saluted respectfully to Noah. She also prepared the water to wash his face and brought it to Noah. "Let me serve Lord Noah to wash up." Yesterday, Annabelle firmly disagreed with letting Noah sleep alone in this unfamiliar place. She tried her best to stay by Noah's side to protect him. If it were an ordinary human, considering that the other party also needed to rest, Noah would never agree to this kind of thing. However, Annabelle was an alien creature and did not need to sleep, so Noah let her be. In addition, in the past, Noah was also known as Medusa's servant to guard him all night in the world of the type moon, so he did not have much discomfort with this matter. Soon, Noah finished washing up under the service of Annabelle, and walked out of the room with Annabelle. As soon as he walked out of the room, Noah heard a conversation. It was from the direction of the hole. With Annabelle, Noah walked in the direction of the hole. After a while, a rather vast hall appeared in front of Noah and Annabelle. In the hall, several people were gathered together to talk. One of them was naturally the owner of this mansion, Gudjifu. In addition to Gudjifu, a group of Grey Rose's elite-level adventurers, led by Haggis, were also all present. However, Noah noticed them. Among these people, there was also a young man. A young man with short blonde hair and a healthy complexion. The young man seemed to have noticed Noah as well. He stared at Noah as if he had seen something he had yearned for even in his dreams. That gaze, to put it nicely, was persistence, to put it bluntly, it was rude. Annabelle's brows were already frowning. Fortunately, after this period of activity in the human world, Annabelle was no longer like before. She didn't want to fight for Noah at the slightest provocation and was very good at restraining herself. As for Noah, he did not care about such a gaze and walked straight forward. "Your Excellency Dole." Gudjifu heard the movement, looked at Noah, and smiled slightly. "Did you rest well last night?" "Very well." Noah returned a smile and said so. "Thank you for your hospitality, Your Excellency Warrior." "No, no, no." Gudjifu shook his head. "I'm very honored to be able to entertain someone like you. Unfortunately, I didn't have a chance to entertain you." Haggis smiled sweetly. "Mr. Noah, please sit down and talk." Chapter 1190. In fact, Noah's initial idea was to leave directly after greeting them. After all, led by Hagrid, one of the only two fine steel teams in the kingdom gathered together to discuss with Gudjifu, who was the kingdom's warrior captain. They must be discussing something important, right? Although Noah had met Gudjifu once and received a lot of favors from Gudjifu yesterday, it didn't mean that Noah would be tactless and disturb others when they were discussing business. After all, Noah was also an outsider, wasn't he? However, after being greeted by Hagrid, Noah was embarrassed to leave directly in front of Gudjifu, who had helped him a lot. He had to sit down at Gudjifu's suggestion. Of course, Annabelle, who claimed to be Noah's follower, still stood behind Noah and didn't sit down. She became the only one present besides the young man who didn't sit down. So, Gudjifu said to Annabelle, "Your Excellency Annabelle, sit down too." "No need." Annabelle didn't even look at Gudjifu and refused directly. "I'm Sir Noah's follower. There's no reason to sit with the master. Is that so? Good Jefu didn't want to force it and nodded. Understood. Please forgive me for my improper consideration. Annabelle is just too serious. Noah smiled as if to smooth things over. Sometimes, even if it's my words, she won't listen. Noah's words made Annabelle, who was indifferent in front of Good Jefu and others, panic and speak quickly. No, no such thing. As long as it's Sir Noah's order, no matter what it is, I will do it. Hearing that, Noah was speechless. Of course, Noah knew about this. The sentence just now was just to smooth things over for Annabelle. However, this inflexible maid didn't seem to see anything, which made Noah a little embarrassed. So, Noah stood up and faced Annabelle. He reached out and lifted Annabelle's chin with a slightly frivolous smile on his face. Are you really going to do it no matter what? Annabelle stiffened from head to toe. Looking at Noah's frivolous smile, Annabelle's beautiful face turned red. Not to mention Annabelle, even the people present were somewhat embarrassed by Noah's sudden action. It was especially so for that young man. Even when facing the strongest warrior of the kingdom, Annabelle didn't show any expression, but when she saw Noah blushing coquettishly in front of him, her heart started to beat faster. When she realized that this wasn't good, she quickly straightened her face. There was no other way. The young man was also loyal to a person who was unbelievably beautiful. In the past, the youth did not believe that there was anyone in this world who could compete with his master in terms of appearance. Now, Annabelle's appearance made the young man realize that the world was still very big. Of course, as far as the youth was concerned, no matter how beautiful Annabelle was, she couldn't be compared with his master. However, looking at a girl who could compete with his master in terms of beauty blushing, the youth couldn't help but feel his heart beating faster. In this way, it made the others feel as if they had disturbed Noah, which made them even more embarrassed than Noah. Noah felt that it was about time. He laughed in his heart and couldn't help but pat Annabelle's pretty face. As a girl, especially a beautiful girl, you can't say to a man, I will listen to you no matter what. Otherwise, not every man can think of Pian Pian. After speaking, Noah released the blushing Annabelle's chin, turned around again, and sat down contentedly. It's really enviable that Mr. Noah can have such a beautiful follower. Hagrid smiled bitterly. To be honest, apart from Lana, I really haven't seen anyone more beautiful than Miss Annabelle. The people present nodded one after another, making the youth at the side look like he wanted to say something but stopped. Oh. Gegland grinned. This virgin seems to be unconvinced. Virgin. The corner of Noah's mouth twitched, and he cast a strange look at the youth. I'm not a virgin. The youth finally couldn't help but speak up. I have a name. My name is Clem. You actually refuted. Gegland said with some surprise. Usually, when I call you that, don't you look indifferent? That's because Clem doesn't care what others think of him. Good Jefu said helplessly. However, in front of the people Clem cares about, it's better to give him some face. Good Jefu's words made Noah's heart move slightly, and he looked at Clem. Clem's expression changed, and he also looked at Noah. Let me introduce. Miyagi spoke up at the right time. Mr. Noah should have heard of the Golden Princess, right? Mihagi's words awakened a part of Noah's memory of the information he had collected during this period of time. Of course, Noah had heard of that name before. Because, in the whole kingdom, the fame of this name, to a certain extent, was even above the kingdom's warrior captain Good Jefu and the leader of the Fine Steel Adventurers team, Mihagi. Lana Ter Chardin Lal Van Seve. With a head of blonde hair as a symbol, she was known for her beauty and wisdom both domestically and abroad, and was praised as the Golden Princess. It was said that this princess had proposed many cross-era policies, although most of them were obstructed by the nobles who cared about their own interests, causing many of them to be rejected. Even so, it still had a great impact on the kingdom. For example, the abolition of the slavery system and the establishment of the Adventurers Guild were facilitated by this princess. Even the kingdom's governance would privately refer to this princess' proposals. Therefore, it was impossible for Noah not to have heard of this princess's name. As if she saw something from Noah's expression, Mihagi smiled slightly and pointed at Clem. This is Princess Lana's follower, responsible for the princess's safety. Greetings, Mr. Noah. Clem bowed to Noah, but his eyes were fixed on Noah. I heard from the warrior captain that you are stronger than him, so it is an honor to be able to meet you. That's only because the warrior captain thinks too highly of me. Noah shook his head. Don't take it seriously. Alright, kid, don't be so polite. Geegland seemed to be unable to stand Noah and Clem's politeness and waved his hand. This virgin isn't here to talk to you politely. He has something to ask of you, if I'm not wrong. Clem was speechless. Geegland's guess was completely correct. Ask me for a favor. Noah asked curiously. Is there anything I can help you with? Yes. Yes. Clem seemed to have become nervous, and after a while, he said so. Can you teach me a little bit about fighting? Noah raised an eyebrow slightly. As expected. Gu Jiefu sighed. I knew it, if you have a favor to ask of someone, then it must be this matter. With Mihagi as the leader, other than Annabelle, everyone else nodded. Needless to say, Clem had done the same thing many times. Because of this, Ibilui, who had been silent all this time, spoke. You still haven't given up? Clem was silent all of a sudden. This was needless to say. Ibilui had said the same thing to Clem many times. Then I'll say it again. Ibilui said with a tone that left no room for doubt. Kid, you don't have talent in this area, whether it's martial arts or magic, it's not suitable for you. So, it's best if you work hard in other areas, don't blindly hope for others to guide you and increase your strength. Clem did not say anything, but lowered his head and remained silent. Seeing this, Noah narrowed his eyes. It seemed like it was just as Ibilui said. This young man named Clem, whether it was martial arts or magic, he did not have talent. But from Clem's eyes, Noah could not see the word give up. Ibilui naturally saw through Clem's thoughts. Talent is something you can't ask for. Ibilui said. No matter how hard you work, if you don't have talent, it's useless. Chapter 1191. Once upon a time, there was a saying that went like this. The so-called success referred to 99% hard work and 1% talent. From this saying, there was no doubt that hard work was the most important thing for a person to do something. Thus, there was the saying that the clumsy bird flies first. However, if the smart bird flew with all its might from the start, could the clumsy bird catch up? The answer was naturally no. Thus, some people said. Although 99% hard work was important, that 1% talent was more important than 99% hard work. If the so-called success was 100%, then even if talent was a small part of it, without it, even if 99% of hard work was put in, lacking that 1%, one would never be able to achieve success. It was all right to apply this phrase to Clem. Clem himself was the clearest. Although he was the princess's follower, Clem's strength wasn't that outstanding. At most, he was slightly stronger than ordinary warriors and soldiers. In terms of adventurers' levels, Clem was roughly equivalent to a gold adventurer. In terms of Yggdrasil's level, Clem was around level 10. Not to mention Gu Jiefu, who was the strongest warrior in the kingdom, and not to mention the fine steel-tier adventurers like Higagi and her party, even if they were compared to many other adventurers, they would still be much weaker. Originally, with Clem's strength, it was impossible for him to become the follower of such a famous princess. The reason why Clem could become the princess's attendant was that when he was young, he was picked up by the princess when he was on the brink of death. That was how he became the princess's attendant. Therefore, the reason why Clem could become the princess's attendant was not because of his outstanding strength, nor was it because of his amazing talent, but because of his fortuitous encounters when he was young. Furthermore, Clem didn't have any talent in martial arts or magic. Putting aside the fact that he hadn't learned any magic, just the ability of a warrior was enough. No matter how much Clem practiced with the sword, even to the point where his hands were bleeding and blisters were breaking out, he still wasn't able to reach the level he had hoped for. A gold adventurer. For those with extraordinary talent, it was a low wall that could be easily crossed. But to Clem, it was an achievement that he had worked so hard to achieve. Then, recently, Clem felt it. The speed of his improvement was getting slower and slower, to the point where it was infinitely close to zero. If this continued, Clem would not be able to make any more progress. He would only be able to achieve this in his lifetime. It was because of this that Clem couldn't wait to ask for guidance after knowing that Noah was an existence more powerful than Gudjiafu. Perhaps, Noah had a way to solve his predicament. At least, Clem didn't want to admit defeat, let alone give up. Thus, Clem could only remain silent in the face of Ibiliua's words. But Ibiliua could easily see the emotions behind Clem's silence and said mercilessly. Some say that talent is a bud before it blossoms. Everyone has it. The only reason why people think they don't have talent is because their talent hasn't bloomed yet. But if you ask me, that's just wishful thinking. Now, one of the most common stories people hear is about a person without talent who relied on his own hard work to become a hero. Because of that, ordinary people can have dreams and hope. Ibiliu snorted. But I want to say that it's not because they don't have talent. It's because they haven't worked hard enough. The talent hidden deep within their bodies hasn't been awakened yet. That's different from you. Ibiliu spoke with confidence. Because you've worked hard, but that's all you've got. Clem's lips parted slightly, but in the end, he couldn't say anything. It wasn't just Clem. Even Hagrid and Gudjiafu were silent. They didn't say anything. Talent isn't something everyone has. Some have it and some don't. Ibiliu glanced at Clem. So, I won't ask you to give up, but you better not force yourself too much. Otherwise, the bigger the hope, the more despair you'll feel when it's gone. Understand? Suddenly, the crowd fell into a deathly silence. Under normal circumstances, when it came to this, someone would speak up for Clem no matter what. But whether it was Hagrid or Gudjiafu, no one chose to speak up for Clem. Noah could see that it wasn't because everyone here didn't care about Clem. On the contrary, everyone here was familiar with Clem, so they didn't choose to speak up. Most likely, everyone here had seen Clem's desperate efforts, but he hadn't been able to get the results he wanted, right? Thus, when they saw Clem forcing himself like a moth to a flame in the pursuit of power, they couldn't bear to see him like this. Instead of letting him continue like this, they felt that it was better to speak up. That way, it wouldn't be so hard for Clem. Ibiliu also had the same feeling, which was why she said such unpleasant words. In other words, everyone here was just worried that Clem wouldn't be able to hold on one day. In fact, Noah more or less agreed with Ibiliu's words. As mentioned before, 99% of effort was very important, but that 1% of talent was also indispensable. Of the two, no matter which one was missing, it would be impossible to achieve the final success. But, although I agree that it's very hard to not have talent, there's one thing I don't agree with. Just like that, Noah suddenly said such a sentence when everyone was silent. Perhaps, talent isn't something everyone can have, but it's also impossible for a useless person to exist. This sentence was like a ray of sunshine, instantly dispelling the gloomy atmosphere. Everyone immediately cast their gazes at Noah, their expressions somewhat stunned. Clem's eyes lit up as he stared at Noah. Under everyone's gaze, Noah shrugged and said, "Perhaps, little brother Clem doesn't have talent in martial arts and magic, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have talent in other areas. If he can spend this effort in these areas, then wouldn't it be like what Miss Ebilui said, that talent can blossom and bear fruit?" Saying such a sentence, Noah looked at Clem. Why do you want to become stronger?" "Why do I want to become stronger?" This question made Clem clench his fist. Once, Clem was a child that no one wanted. He didn't even see his parents' faces, wandering the kingdom as an orphan. In such a world, this was not a rare thing. But that day, Clem met light. She was called the Gold by the people, and had the beauty that no one in the kingdom could match. This princess didn't care about the beggar-like, dirty Clem at all, and extended her hand to him. From that moment onwards, Clem's fate changed. Then, was there a second reason why Clem wanted to become stronger? "I want to have power." Clem spat out a strong and powerful voice. "The power to protect Lady Lana from any enemy." Hearing this, Noah smiled and stood up. "Then let me see how strong this power is." Clem was stunned. In Gujifu's mansion, there was a rather spacious courtyard. At this moment, in this courtyard, with Gujifu and Haggis as the leaders, Ebilui, Gragland, Hina, and Tia were all gathered together. Annabelle was alone at the other end. However, everyone's gaze was on the center of the courtyard. There, Noah and Clem were facing each other. Noah's expression was calm. Clem, on the other hand, was a bit serious, and there was a faint trace of nervousness. Noah raised his eyes and looked at Clem, who was across from him. "Don't worry about it. Just attack as much as you like." Chapter 1192. Noah's words startled Clem. After hesitating for a moment, he asked tentatively, "Are you not going to use any weapons?" Indeed. Even though Clem wasn't equipped with any equipment, he still had a long sword at his waist. One of his hands was gripping the sword tightly, obviously intending to use a sword. However, not only was Noah dressed in casual clothes, he didn't even carry a single weapon. Moreover, it seemed that Noah didn't intend to use any weapons when facing Clem. Of course, Clem didn't think that Noah was looking down on him. The reason why he asked this question was to get some information. Because if he wasn't going to use any weapons, it was very likely that he was going to use magic. Clem wanted to use this as an excuse to get information about Noah's upcoming battle tactics. If Noah intended to use a weapon, it meant that he was going to use the methods of a warrior to fight. If Noah insisted on not using any weapons, then Clem had to be wary of Noah using magic. This was Clem's plan. However, in the next moment, Noah's action stunned everyone present. A weapon. A thought-provoking smile appeared on Noah's face. He raised his hand and extended a finger. "Then I'll use this finger to fight you." Finger. Finger. Clem was completely stunned. Hagrid, Gujifu, Ebilui, Gorgland, Tina, and the others were also stunned. "What is the meaning of this?" Gorgland frowned. "Is that guy looking down on us?" The others exchanged glances with each other before turning to look at Noah with a slightly serious expression. They wanted to see how Noah intended to fight with a single finger. On the other hand, looking at Clem's dazed expression, Noah revealed a mischievous smile. "What? Not going to attack? Don't tell me you're afraid of my finger." Noah's words made Clem react. He stared at Noah's finger, trying to see something from it. Unfortunately, no matter how he looked, Clem could only see a very ordinary finger. With no other choice, Clem could only warn himself that he had to be more vigilant. The other party was an expert that even the strongest warrior in the kingdom admitted to being inferior to. Then, no matter what kind of method the other party planned to use, compared to Clem, he would only be stronger, not weaker. If he let his guard down because of this, it would be over. Thus, Clem took a deep breath and slowly pulled out the long sword at his waist. He pointed it at Noah and lowered his waist as he spoke in a low voice. "Then, I'm going." The moment he finished speaking, Clem was like a spring that had been pushed to its limit. His entire body suddenly shot out and swept towards Noah. His speed was naturally faster than anyone present. However, the distance between Noah and Clem wasn't that far to begin with. Thus, in just a blink of an eye, Clem flashed in front of Noah and raised the long sword in his hand above his head. With a tearing sound, he heavily chopped down at Noah's shoulder. Although he didn't think that he could win against Noah, but Noah wasn't equipped with a single piece of equipment, and he didn't have a single weapon in his hand, so Clem subconsciously showed mercy. However, in the next second, Clem realized there was no meaning in showing mercy at all. Clang dash. Following a clear sound of metal clashing, Clem's long sword that was aimed at Noah's shoulder was directly blocked. It was blocked by a finger. Whoa! Clem was shocked. Even Haggis, Gudjefu, Ibilui, and the others had looks of surprise on their faces. Then, Noah's voice sounded with some helplessness. "So, didn't I say?" Noah looked at Clem's shocked face and smiled. "You don't have to worry. Just attack as you please." After saying that, Noah slightly bent his finger, which was blocking the sharp longsword, and fiercely flicked the tip of the longsword. Clang dash. With a bell-like impact, Clem was unable to resist the slightest bit of force with his ability. The force was reflected back from the long sword in his hand. Clem was sent flying along with his sword. After rolling on the ground a few times, he finally stabilized his body. The whole place suddenly went silent. "Noah! Lord Noah!" Clem looked at Noah in shock. "Are you a warrior monk?" Warrior monk. That was a profession. In Yggdrasil, there were more than 2,000 basic professions, including basic professions and advanced professions. However, the maximum level of each profession could only be raised to level 15. Therefore, if one wanted to reach level 100, one character would have to train at least 7 professions. Of course, one could also inefficiently train each profession to level 1. After training 100 professions, one would reach the maximum level of 100. Because of this, in Yggdrasil, as long as it wasn't done on purpose, there wouldn't be identical characters. After all, out of the 2,000 professions, it was impossible for one to pick 7 or more professions to be exactly the same. This world had a lot in common with the game Yggdrasil. One of them was professions. Just like Yggdrasil, the people in this world had all kinds of professions. For example, Gudjefu was a warrior. Clem was also a warrior. The fine steel adventurers led by Haggis also had their own areas of expertise. As for the magic chanters that people often talked about, it was actually just a general term for those who could use magic. Among the magic chanters, there were also many professions. For example, clerics, priests, forest priests, occultists, enchanters, magicians, bards, witches, talisman masters, immortals, and so on. They were all collectively known as magic chanters. It was said that among the many professions, there was a profession called warrior monk. It was a profession that could use a special power called chi, and use one's own body as a weapon. The existence of this profession generally didn't use any weapons. Instead, they used chi to strengthen their own body and train it to the limit. Once trained to the limit, the warrior monk's fist could even directly smash the hardest steel. The hardness of the body could also reach the level of steel. Noah blocked the sharp longsword with a finger. If this wasn't the power of a magic tool, then it could only be the ability of a warrior monk. Thus, when Clem said this, Haggis and the others understood. Only Gudjefu, like Clem, looked at Noah with a face of uncertainty. Although Gudjefu wasn't sure if Noah was a warrior monk, he knew that Noah could use magic. The knight who attacked Khan village was turned into steel by Noah's unknown magic. In addition to his intuition, Gudjefu always felt that Noah was a magic chanter with a power stronger than himself. Now, Noah broke Gudjefu's belief. Could it be that in addition to being a magic chanter stronger than himself, Noah was also a warrior monk who trained his body to be able to block sharp weapons? Gudjefu's heart tightened, and the way he looked at Noah also changed. Of course, Noah wasn't a warrior monk. There were only 3 reasons why he could block a sharp long sword with a finger. 1. Noah had reached LV4 and reached the SSS stage of durability, so his resistance to attacks was quite high. 2. Noah had a permanent magic called Sword's Protection, which could weaken physical attacks. 3. Noah had Swordsman, which could increase the attack power of his own sword-type weapon, and weaken the attack power of the enemy's sword-type weapon. If Clem used a high-level weapon, it would be a different story. However, an ordinary longsword was no longer able to hurt Noah at this moment. Although that was what he said, Noah wouldn't say it out loud. Noah just pointed his finger at Clem. "What's wrong? Aren't you going to continue attacking?" Hearing this, Clem tightened his grip on the sword, and his eyes sharpened. He finally put aside his unnecessary worries and charged forward with all his strength. Swoosh! In the whistling sound of the wind, the sharp longsword once again slashed at Noah. Chapter 1193. Hiya! With an imposing shout, the sharp longsword in Clem's hand turned into streaks of sword light. Like a cutting machine, it slashed towards Noah's body. Looking at the continuous slashes, Noah stretched out his finger with an expressionless face. He only moved when the sword lights that resembled a cutting machine shot toward him. On the side, everyone could only see that just like Clem's slash, Noah's hand suddenly turned into a blur as it danced continuously. Clang, 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 clang. Immediately, the numerous merciless slashes that were rushing toward Noah were blocked by his extremely ordinary finger amidst clear clashing sounds. Clang! When the last slash landed on Noah's finger, and the sharp long sword was blocked by Noah's finger, everyone present saw it. Noah blocked one slash after another. His fingers, which were as hard as steel, suddenly moved. Like an arrow leaving the bowstring, he swept towards Clem's forehead and flicked his finger. Bang! Undoubtedly, it was just a flick of the forehead, but it caused a muffled sound. With a muffled sound, Clem was abruptly sent flying by that extremely ordinary finger. Like a kite with a broken string, he slammed into a wall amidst the sharp sound of breaking air. Cough! Clem only felt that all the air in his chest had been spat out at this moment. His head felt as if it had been hit by a stick, and even his vision became blurry. Logically speaking, if one's head was struck by a force that could send a robust youth flying, it wouldn't be strange for one's head to explode. However, Clem didn't feel any intense pain on his forehead. He only felt a sharp pain on his back when he hit the wall. Clem knew what this meant. It meant that not only did Noah have the terrifying ability to block sharp long swords without suffering any injuries, he could also control this ability to perfection. When Clem felt dizzy and his vision became blurry, Noah's voice sounded again. "If that Princess Lana was here right now, I would only need a single second to kill her while you're still lying there." Clem's heart trembled. A strong emotion burst forth from Clem's heart, causing Clem's willpower to soar several times. His incomparably dizzy mind was forcibly stirred up, and he gradually regained consciousness. His vision began to recover. The person who pointed a finger at him was also imprinted in Clem's eyes. Clem tightly clenched his teeth and forced his body to support himself. With one hand on the wall, he stood up shakily. The entire process was extremely difficult, but in the end, Clem successfully stood up. Seeing Clem like this, Noah narrowed his eyes and suddenly smiled. So that's how it is. Your kind intentions are truly rare. After saying this, Noah's expression changed. His expression became emotionless. It's just that, in the face of death, will this kind of heart be able to remain intact? Following this sentence, in the next instant, an astonishing aura burst forth from Noah's body. That aura was like a tangible pressure, enveloping the entire space. Everyone present felt their shoulders become heavy, and their bodies involuntarily lowered slightly. Hagrid, Gudjafu, Ibilua, Geglant, Hina, T, and the others were completely speechless. Because, even if they were steel-grade existences that stood at the peak of humanity, they still felt a burst of shock. Even these players who were at least level 29 were in such a state, let alone Clem, who was only level 10. Clem felt as if his heart was being squeezed tightly by a hand. On the opposite side, Noah's figure suddenly expanded to an indescribable height in Clem's eyes, making Clem feel as if his breathing had stopped. It couldn't be helped. Without using authority, even if he didn't use the power of Demon Slayer or Gate of Babylon, Noah was still comparable to a level 100 existence. The aura released by a level 100 existence made even Ibilua, who was estimated by Noah to be around level 50, stiffen, not to mention Clem, who was around level 10. However, Noah didn't care about Clem's reaction at all and slowly opened his mouth. Until now, you were the one who launched the attack. Now, it's time for me to attack. Saying this, Noah's voice pierced Clem's heart. So, if you don't want to die, then resist with all your might. At this moment, Noah's voice was already far away in Clem's ears, as if it had become incomparably distant, but Clem heard it clearly. Thus, Clem knew. 1 second. In the next second, if he couldn't react, then he would die. Rationally, Clem told himself that Noah wouldn't suddenly kill him. However, when he felt Noah's aura coming towards him like a storm, Clem couldn't help but think this way. Perhaps, he really would die. Death. His brain couldn't function anymore. His body couldn't move. At this moment, there were two kinds of emotions in Clem's heart. 1. Fear. 2. Anger. The fear was the fear of Noah. Anger is anger at oneself. Clem could tell anyone without hesitation that he wasn't afraid of death. If he could die for his master, then it didn't matter when he died. However, the master he needed to protect wasn't by his side, nor was he facing any danger. Instead, he was waiting for his guards in the palace. Under such circumstances, how can I die without doing anything? Clem roared. In his heart, his anger towards himself overcame his fear. At this moment, Clem seemed to hear a pop sound in his brain, as if something was opened. Immediately, a torrent rushed back and forth in Clem's body. That torrent was called power. Then, Clem felt it. His hands could move. His feet could move. His senses seemed to have reached their limits, and he could even feel the vibrations in the air. As everyone knew, in order to prevent the body from overloading, the human brain would limit the power of the muscles to a certain extent. However, when one reached the limit, the brain's limit on the muscles would be temporarily lifted, allowing the body to display an unimaginable explosive power. At this moment, the human brain would secrete a large amount of hormones, and their thinking ability would be focused on survival. The brain would be able to process all kinds of huge amounts of information at high speed, searching for the best way to act. Now, Clem was in such a situation. Thus, in that instant, Clem's physical body, perception, and physical abilities were raised to a whole new level. His strength, which was originally only at the level of a gold adventurer, was promoted to platinum adventurer in one go. Hiya! With an explosive shout, Clem gripped his sword so tightly that his veins popped out. He bent down and suddenly shot towards Noah like a bullet fired from a gun. In the next moment, a sword that flashed with cold light cut through the air. With a sharp sword hum, it slashed towards Noah's direction. Clang! A crisp sound that was louder than any of the previous collisions resounded throughout the courtyard. However, it was not the sound of fingers clashing with swords. Instead, it was the sound of the overly powerful slash that caused the sharp long sword to break into two pieces. The broken sword was thrown into the air and spun like a windmill. Finally, it stabbed into the ground in the distance. Clem, on the other hand, gripped the remaining half of his sword tightly and stared at Noah. Under Clem's gaze, Noah was silent for a moment. Then, he smiled at Clem. Congratulations, you've successfully broken through. Chapter 1194. Congratulations, you've successfully broken through your limits. When these words came out of Noah's mouth, the aura that was like a tempestuous wave suddenly disappeared as if it had never existed in the first place. On the side, Gejef, Hagrid, Ibilui, Gragland, Tina, and Tia seemed to have only just remembered that they needed to breathe. They hurriedly took in a deep breath. Clem grasped the remaining half of his sword tightly and panted heavily. He looked at the broken long sword in his hand absent-mindedly. After a while, Clem seemed to finally let out a sigh of relief. His body was like a puppet with its strings cut. He slowly knelt on the ground and greedily breathed in fresh air into his lungs. However, even so, Clem still looked at the broken long sword in his hand in a daze. It was as if he couldn't believe the strength he had just used. He looked at Noah timidly, as if he was afraid that he was dreaming. Just now, you've broken through your limits. Noah met Clem's gaze and chuckled. In words that you can understand, it means that you have comprehended a new martial skill. A new battle technique. Clem looked at Noah blankly, as if he still couldn't react. You should be able to feel it, right? Noah laughed and said to Clem. Just now, you used strength that exceeded your limits. This is a fact. Hearing Noah's words, Clem looked at the broken long sword in his hand again. Yes. No one knew better than Clem. Just now, Clem had used strength that exceeded his previous limits. Noah said that Clem had comprehended a new battle technique. It was a battle technique that could release the restrictions of the brain, from the body to the senses, and improve the body's functions in all aspects. After that, Clem named this battle technique Brain Liberation. As long as he used this battle technique, Clem's strength would increase to a whole new level. He would obtain strength that could rival platinum-ranked adventurers. This wasn't a small increase. One had to know that Clem's original strength was only comparable to a gold-ranked adventurer, which was equivalent to around level 10. He was also equivalent to a magician who could cast second-tier spells. On the other hand, platinum adventurers were equivalent to level 15 and above. They were also equivalent to magicians who could cast tier 3 spells. If it was said that Clem was only stronger than the average soldier when he didn't use brain liberation, then Clem was qualified to be called a first-rate soldier when he used this skill. For Clem, this was definitely an extraordinary improvement. After understanding this fact, Clem was somewhat excited and subconsciously stood up. However, just as Clem stood up, a wave of intense pain and fatigue attacked his body, causing him to lose his footing and fall forward. But before that, someone caught Clem. Don't force yourself to stand up, just sit on the ground and rest. Gujiefu appeared in front of Clem and caught him. He gently put him on the ground and looked straight into Clem's eyes. It seems that using that skill to break through one's limits for a long time will cause great fatigue and burden on the body. You have to be careful when using it. The skill called brain liberation was originally free from the limitations of the human brain on the body's muscles. The reason why the human brain would create such limitations on the muscles was to prevent unnecessary burdens on the body. Releasing such limitations would naturally cause a burden on the body, and it might even cause the muscles to break. Therefore, it was definitely not a skill that could be used for a long time. Clem seemed to have understood this point. He took a deep breath and calmed down. He forced himself to endure the pain in his body and looked at Noah. He lowered his head deeply. "Thank you very much, Lord Noah." At this point, how could Clem not understand? Just now, the reason why Noah released such a powerful aura was to stimulate Clem's potential. When a person was at their limits, the chances of breaking through their limits would increase by several times. Noah, who understood this principle, after confirming Clem's determination, used this method to stimulate Clem's potential, allowing Clem to comprehend the martial skill called mental liberation. Otherwise, Noah wouldn't have released such a powerful aura to deal with an opponent who couldn't even leave a scratch on his finger. Therefore, Clem's heart was filled with gratitude towards Noah. "Don't thank me. This is the result of your hard work. I only gave you a push." Noah spread his hands and acted as if he didn't do anything. "Moreover, you wanted me to teach you how to fight, but I didn't have that much time to teach you step by step. That's why I chose to use such a method. It's not something to be grateful for. Even so, I am still very grateful," Clem said with a sincere tone. "Without Lord Noah, I might not have been able to improve no matter how hard I work. If there is a chance, I will definitely repay your kindness." "Then you should repay the warrior chief." Noah glanced at Gudjefu and said helplessly. "It's because I'm indebted to Sir Warrior, and because Sir Warrior seems to care about you very much, that's why I gave you a push." This also made me realize that I underestimated Lord Dole. Gudjefu laughed bitterly. "Not only are you a magic chanter whose strength is far above mine, you're also a warrior monk. Your body has been tempered to the point that it can rival steel. I'm sure I wouldn't be able to last more than 10 moves against you." This sentence was heard by Ihagi and the others who were also approaching. "Magic chanter." Ibilui looked at Noah with great surprise. "You're also a magic chanter." Tina and Tina also looked at each other before rising to their feet. It wasn't as if they hadn't seen people who practiced both martial arts and magic. However, as the saying goes, mastery is better than erudition. Focusing one's limited energy on martial arts and magic would only make one's martial arts and magic mediocre. To be able to improve one's magic to a level that even Gudjefu couldn't compare to, one had to be at least at the 5th tier of the fine steel tier. To be able to use 5th tier magic while also being as tough as steel as a warrior monk. "Good boy, you hid your strength so well." Gigrain looked at Noah and laughed heartily after a while. "Not bad, I'm interested in you. Do you want to sleep with me for a night, boy?" Noah almost fell over. "A one-night stand? Do you have to be so open? You'd better know your place, brainless ant." Annabelle walked over slowly, and stared at Gegland with an icy gaze. "You want to serve Lord Noah like this? Why don't you go back to the furnace and be rebuilt?" Gigrain glowered at them, and he was just about to yell something when Tina and Tia held him back. "Don't you know where you are before speaking? He has a servant who's as beautiful as Princess Lana by his side. How could he be interested in you?" With that said, Tina and Tia dragged the struggling Gigrain away. "That's impossible," Ibiroi muttered to herself as she looked at Noah through the mask. "How could a human be so strong? And he's so young." Only Mihagi looked at Noah with a twinkle in her eyes. Soon, Mihagi seemed to have made a decision. She stepped forward and spoke to Noah. "Mr. Noah, there's something I hope you can help me with." Noah was slightly taken aback by Haggis's sudden words. Ebru and the others were also stunned. Then, as if they had thought of something, they stood up in surprise. Leader. Alberu hesitated for a moment and said with uncertainty. You're not thinking of asking him to help you with that, are you? Gudjefu also seemed to have thought of something. He looked at Noah with bright eyes. If we can get Sir Dole's help, then there won't be any accidents. Hearing this, Noah frowned slightly and looked around. When he found that everyone's eyes were fixed on him, he looked at Mihagi. Mihagi nodded and said, Please go inside and talk. Chapter 1195. Under Ohajisai and Gudjefu's greeting, Noah brought Annabelle and the fine steel-level adventurers of the Blue Rose Guild back into the mansion and came to the hall. Other than Annabelle, who was loyal to Noah, and Clem, who claimed that he did not have the right to sit on the same level as everyone present, the rest of the people sat down. Just as they sat down, Ohajisai went straight to the main topic. I wonder if Mr. Noah has heard of the organization called Yakushi. Yakushi. Noah raised an eyebrow. Until now, most of Noah's information about this world came from the Holy Bible of Sunlight, of the Si Lien cult nation. The rest was obtained from Khan village. Therefore, Noah did not know much about some of the powers in the kingdom. However, some of the things that could be said to be well known, Noah only knew about them through hearsay when he was in Ylantir. For example, Noah only knew about Princess Lana, who had the title of Gold, from hearsay. And in this part of the information obtained from hearsay, there were also some deeds of the so-called Yakushi organization. It was a powerful criminal organization that was entrenched in the darkness of the kingdom. Perhaps it was not known how powerful this criminal organization was, but from the general structure of this organization, one could more or less judge its power. It was said that the Yakushi organization was just like its name, divided into 8 departments. These 8 departments were respectively involved in the slave trade, assassination, smuggling, theft, drug trade, bodyguard, finance, and gambling, a total of 8 businesses. The departments coexisted with each other, and could be said to be the #1 illegal organization in the kingdom. Of course, this was not the most important thing. The most important thing was that this criminal organization had secret dealings with many of the kingdom's nobles. They were in cahoots with those dirty nobles, harming the people together. Their influence had already seeped into the political field. Therefore, even if in the eyes of the law, the Yakushi was undoubtedly a scourge, but because many nobles were secretly supporting this criminal organization, the kingdom could not do anything about it. Therefore, if one had to use a word to describe the Yakushi, the most suitable word would undoubtedly be malignant tumor. A malignant tumor that had taken root and sprouted underground in the whole kingdom. Now, since Ohajisai mentioned this malignant tumor, then, the answer to what she wanted Noah to help with was obvious. At that moment, Noah looked at Ohajisai. You want me to help you get rid of the Yakushi? Hearing this, Ohajisai's expression became a little bitter. Not only Ohajisai, even Gudjefu looked like he had swallowed some bitter water, as if he could not say anything. If we can, of course we want to get rid of this criminal organization. Ohajisai sighed. It's just that the Hachiko's infiltration into the kingdom is really too terrifying. With those aristocrats secretly supporting them, it's really too difficult to completely eradicate them. Speaking here, Ohajisai looked and looked. And said. In the Yakushi, the 8 departments, 8 departments. The Yakushi's the Yakushi organization's assesses. Hearing this, Noah more or less understood what Haggis was trying to say. Recently, we have received reliable information. Haggis looked straight at Noah. It seems that the meeting of the managers of the various departments of the 8-book finger will be held soon. Ibilua, Gegland, and Tina straightened their backs slightly at Haggis' words. Noah, who was keenly aware of this, came to a realization. No wonder the 3 fine steel-level adventurers from the Blue Rose would suddenly appear in a border area like Ylantir. It turned out that they had gone there to collect information on the Hachibana. Do you still remember the outlaws from yesterday, Sir Dole? Good Jefu asked Noah. Those are the pawns that Hachibana first sent to the capital to prepare for the meeting. My subordinates discovered their tracks by chance, so I led the troops to chase after them. This proves that the meeting of the various departments of Hachibana will indeed be held in the capital in a few days. This is undoubtedly a good opportunity, Haggis said in a loud voice. If we can find the location where the Hachibana is holding the meeting and take down those managers, even if we can't destroy the entire Hachibana, we can at least hurt the Hachibana. Is that so? Noah looked at Haggis meaningfully. But isn't the Hachibana secretly colluding with many nobles? Even if we arrest them, it won't be long before they are declared innocent and released with the help of those nobles, right? Hearing this, Haihei suddenly smiled. That's only if our goal is to arrest them. There was no one who didn't understand the meaning behind Higusi's words, including Annabelle and Clem. Those guys are just pests that pollute the kingdom. Good Jefu snorted coldly and said, eradicating all of them is definitely beneficial to the kingdom. If that's the case, with everyone here, is there any problem? Noah looked around at Haggis and the rest. We have Sir Good Jefu, who is known as the strongest warrior in the kingdom, and the various elite fine steel-level adventurers. Can't we take down the Hachibana? Haggis and the rest instantly looked at each other, then looked at Noah in unison. Mr. Noah, the criminal organization of the Hachibana is not simple at all, Haggis said seriously. In the 8 departments of the Hachibana, the security department in charge of bodyguards has many experts. Among them, there are 6 of the highest-level bodyguards known as the 6 Arms. It is said that every member of the 6 Arms is in existence that can compete with the fine steel-level adventurers. Every one of them is very strong. Good Jefu continued Haggis' words. In terms of combat power, although the members of the Pitsangxiang are also fine steel-level adventurers, there are only 5 of them. Moreover, the other side not only has the 6 arms level bodyguards, but also other combat personnel of various sizes. If the members of the Pitsangxiang were to face them alone, I'm afraid it would be quite disadvantageous. Noah's heart skipped a beat as he glanced at Ibirui. Ibirui seemed to have felt Noah's gaze and glared at Noah. Good Jefu probably didn't know Ibirui's true strength, right? Otherwise, he wouldn't think that the Pitsangxiang couldn't deal with the 6 arms. With Ibirui's strength of at least level 50, even if she faced all the members of the 6 arms, she should be able to win. However, the small soldiers of the Hachibana were indeed a problem. Originally, we came here with the intention of asking the chief warrior to help us a little. With the chief warrior's troops, we have more confidence in dealing with the Hachibana. Haggis shook her head. However, although the chief warrior's troops are directly under his command, after all, his job is to protect the king. He can't freely dispatch them for personal purposes. Personal purposes. Noah narrowed his eyes and sneered. So, to annihilate the criminal organization, there is also a personal purpose. You can't openly dispatch the country's troops for assistance? Haggis and Good Jefu were suddenly speechless. However, that was something that couldn't be helped. If they openly dispatched troops to deal with the Hachibana, the nobles who received the news would definitely not let it go. Yesterday, it was because the Hachibana's outlaws were fighting on the streets that gave Good Jefu an excuse to dispatch troops. Otherwise, those nobles who were in cahoots with the Hachibana would definitely not watch Good Jefu attack the Hachibana. Therefore, Haggis and Good Jefu also had their grievances unspeakable. Noah secretly shook his head and asked such a question. Speaking of which, why do the members of the Pitsangxiang need to point out the Hachibana? That shouldn't be allowed, right? The establishment of the Adventurers Guild was mainly to protect humans from external threats, which was to deal with all kinds of demi-human monsters, thus protecting the human residents. For this reason, the guild had an unwritten rule, which was to never interfere in the disputes between humans. Otherwise, the three countries, the kingdom, the empire, and the theocracy, due to political reasons, would probably cause the adventurers' guild of each country to be at odds with each other, making it impossible for the adventurers to cross the country and help each other to resist the invasion of monsters. Therefore, the adventurers must abide by this unwritten rule. Now, Haggis and her group were violating the taboo of the adventurers. This matter could be big or small. Chapter 1196. At the end of the day, due to the nature of the Adventurers Guild, they could only provide help to humans in resisting foreign races. Even if the Adventurers Guild could easily solve some of the problems of humans, they would not interfere. Although the Hachibana was undoubtedly harmful to the kingdom and everyone had the right to punish it, it was still a human organization after all. Therefore, due to the nature of the organization, the Adventurers Guild would not interfere with the commission to deal with the Hachibana. In other words, it was impossible for Hagi to deal with the Hachibana because of a commission. To be more precise, it should be said that it was impossible for it to be because of a certain commission that was acknowledged and issued by the Adventurers Guild. In other words, if Hagi wanted to deal with the Hachibana, it was either because of her personal reasons or because she accepted a commission that was not recognized by the Adventurers Guild. No matter which reason it was, the Adventurers Guild would not agree with it. Hagi seemed to have expected Noah to ask such a question. Just as she was about to say something, Clem, who had been listening quietly, suddenly spoke up. Lady Aindola will deal with the Hachibana because of Lady Lana's commission. Clem said. The princess has always been thinking of ways to deal with the Hachibana. Previously, she had tried her best to abolish the slavery system. However, the Hachibana was involved in the slave trade in the first place. Now, they are still involved in this trade. Therefore, the princess asked the members of the Blue Rose to help. This was the reason why Clem was here. Lana and I can be considered to be very good friends in private. That is why I cannot ignore her request. Haggis laughed in spite of herself. Moreover, to the kingdom, the Hachibana is also a tumor. If it is possible to get rid of it, I will not refuse. As for the Adventurers Guild, you don't have to worry about it. Ibirua glanced at Noah. Although we violated the rules by getting involved in the conflict between humans, we're still fine steel adventurers. We can be considered the representative of the entire kingdom's Adventurer Guild. Moreover, the people we're dealing with aren't good people. The guild will still choose to turn a blind eye to our actions. Indeed. In the Adventurers Guild, fine steel adventurers had many privileges. Even the guild could not punish fine steel adventurers, let alone banish them. That being said, reputation and evaluation were also very important to adventurers. If they didn't have a good reputation, they wouldn't be able to accept many commissions. Although Hagi and her team would not be punished for dealing with the Hachibana this time, they had still broken the rules and their evaluation in the guild would still be lowered. Presumably, it would cause some kind of damage, right? When the entire capital once again ushered in noon, in the direction of the city gate, a group of people quietly appeared here. With Agagi as the leader, the group of Wild Rose mercenary members had basically changed their equipment. Both Agagi and Gigrain had put on armor. Unlike Gigrain's heavy armor that was almost like a burly man's, Agagi was equipped with light armor. Only the breastplate, gauntlets, boots, and armor skirt were covered with red tights. Together with her golden hair that shone in the moonlight, she could be described as heroic and radiant. Meanwhile, Tina and Tia had changed into tight-fitting black suits with black veils covering their faces, leaving only their eyes exposed. They were also equipped with breastplates, gauntlets, and kneecaps, and each of them held a dagger in their hands. Only Abra was still wearing the same black robe and mask. She hadn't changed at all. Of course, it was not only Abreu who did not change. Noah and Annabelle also did not change their equipment. The group stood in front of the city gate. After confirming their equipment and the number of people, they nodded to each other. Then, let's confirm the battle plan for this time. Agagi said as she stepped forward. She had Tina and Tia spread out a map and pointed to a location on the map. Our target this time is here. This is. Noah looked at the mark on the map and frowned slightly. A village. The place Agagi was pointing to was a village. This is not an ordinary village. Agagi said in a serious tone. We have already investigated. This village is one of the departments in charge of the drug trade. It is used to cultivate drugs. Cultivate drugs? Noah said in surprise. An entire village is cultivating drugs. Yes. Agagi nodded heavily. This is only one of them. When she said this, there was a hint of disgust in her voice. That was disgust towards the nobles. In the kingdom, most of the land was owned by the nobles. The royal family only owned 30% of the land. The rest was privately owned. And this village was located in the territory of one of the nobles. Since the entire village was cultivating drugs, it was obvious that the nobles of this territory had instructed them to do so. One could only imagine how evil the nobles were. Our mission this time is to destroy this village. Agagi calmed herself down and explained the reason. Because we still don't know where the meetings of the various departments of the Hachibana are held. With the support of the nobles, it will be difficult for us to find out. So, as long as we attack this village, we will definitely alert the other party. Alert the other party. Noah was confused. What would happen if they alerted the other party? Wouldn't it alert the other party and make them more vigilant? Chapter 1197. It was unknown if Ohagi saw through the doubts in Noah's heart, but she said this in a fluent manner. Although the Hachibunjii is called an organization on the surface, in reality, as everyone knows, they are made up of 8 departments. Rather than saying that they are an organization, it would be more accurate to say that they are 8 organizations. However, these 8 organizations are cooperating with each other, and they are completely united by their own interests. Ohagi pointed at the village on the map that was used to cultivate drugs. If we destroy one of the departments, which is the stronghold used by the drug trade department to cultivate drugs, then we should be able to obtain information on the other 7 departments. Haihei's words undoubtedly confused the rest of the people. Why was Ohagi so sure that the village had information on the other 7 departments of the Hachibunjii? Logically speaking, as partners in the same organization, this kind of important information that could possibly leak the information of their partners should not be very likely to appear, right? Only Noah, after thinking about how Ohagi had specifically emphasized that the Hachibunjii was only a cooperative organization, his heart skipped a beat. You mean to say that the drug department that is cultivating drugs in this village will deliberately put the information of the other 7 departments there to provide to the enemy? That's right. Ohagi laughed coldly. If it is an enemy that has the ability to destroy the stronghold, then for a department, it will definitely be a very difficult enemy to deal with. Knowing this clearly, when a department is in trouble, this kind of organization that is only tied together by interests will definitely think of how to stay out of it. And in order to not let the other departments stay out of it, and in order to divert the powerful enemy's attention to the other departments, every department of the Hachibunjii should have prepared the information of the other departments in advance in the stronghold, right? Ibirui smacked her lips. Although I had already expected that the so-called underworld organizations would not really unite, I didn't expect it to be this ridiculous. George Land, Kina, and T also showed some disgust on their faces. Obviously, this kind of behavior that was equivalent to betraying one's companions, for an adventurer team that could entrust their lives to each other, it was definitely despicable. So, as long as we destroy this village, we can get information on the other 7 departments besides the drug department. Haggis clapped her hands, attracting everyone's attention. In addition, when we investigated this village, we also found out about the drug department. In this way, we have gathered all the information about the 8 departments of the 8 books. As long as they could gather all the information about the headquarters of the Hachibana's 8 departments and destroy them in one fell swoop, they would definitely be able to deal a fatal blow to the Hachibana. When that happened, the managers of the 8 departments that happened to be gathered in the capital would no longer be able to sit still. They would have no choice but to seek help from the nobles in the capital who were in cahoots with them. This way, with Hagi's status as a noble and a fine steel adventurer, together with good Jiafu's spies and Princess Lana's intelligence, they would definitely be able to follow the clues and find out where the managers of the 8 departments of the Hachikatsu are gathered. Destroy all of the Hachibana's main camps and eliminate all of the managers of the 8 departments. Then, the Hachibana will only be left with a few remnants, and the threat it poses to the kingdom will be greatly reduced. Hagi's eyes shone brightly. This is our plan. Hearing this, the gazes of the fine steel adventurers gathered on Noah. Although it was said that it would be easy to destroy the 8 main camps of the Hachibana, then eliminate the managers of the 8 departments, greatly weakening the power of the Hachibana. But how could it be easy to do? Other things aside, the 8 main camps of the Hachibana would definitely be filled with experts. Without a certain amount of military strength, it would be impossible to destroy them. Unfortunately, the kingdom was unable to provide any help in this aspect, so it could only be done by Haggis and her team. With the strength of one of the only 2 fine steel adventurer teams in the kingdom, destroying the main camps of the Hachibana's departments might not be difficult. But the difficult part was that once the main camp of a department was destroyed, they would know that the information about their own department would definitely be prepared by the manager of the destroyed department beforehand. The other departments in the stronghold would definitely respond accordingly, or even change their stronghold directly. Thus, if they wanted to destroy the main camps of the 8 departments of the Hachibana, they could only act at the same time. This way, even if every adventurer of the Blue Rose was the highest level fine steel adventurer and had the ability to destroy a stronghold by themselves, in the situation where there were only 5 members, they could only destroy the main camps of 5 departments at the same time. In addition, there was still the strongest fighter in the Hachibana, 6 Arms, who could be said to be comparable to a fine steel adventurer, so this plan was rather unrealistic. Unless Noah made a move. With Noah's inhuman combat power, and Annabelle, whose strength was still unknown, the chances of winning would be the highest. With Noah and Annabelle, when the time came, the group would be able to destroy the main camps of the 7 departments of the Hachibana in one fell swoop. As for the remaining drug department, because they had already received information, good Jefu was always keeping an eye on it. Even if the troops directly under him couldn't be dispatched, they would still be able to deal with one stronghold. So, as long as Noah made a move, this plan would have a chance of succeeding. Under everyone's gaze, Noah spread his hands. Then, destroying this village that is cultivating drugs is the first step of the whole plan, right? Yes. Ohajisai nodded, her hand moved up from the map, and pointed to a mountain range. However, if we want to go to that village, we have to pass through this mountain range on the way. There are many magic beast tribes living in the mountain range, so we have to cross over to reach that village. After saying that, Ohajisai let Hina and T put away the map, and looked around at everyone. We don't know when the meeting of the 8 departments of the Hachibana will be held, so we have to hurry up and not let the other party's meeting end and leave the capital. Then, we won't be able to catch those managers. Everyone nodded one after another, indicating that they understood. Then, let's use flight first and rush to the mountain range in one go, then enter the mountain range. Ohajisai looked at Noah and Annabelle. Can Mr. Noah and Miss Annabelle use flight? No problem. Noah nodded. Let's go. After receiving Noah's signal, Ohajisai and Eber stepped forward at the same time, and took out a scroll of parchment from their arms. It was a scroll. Ohajisai and Eber shook the scroll in their hands at the same time. With a wave of magic, 2 translucent floating boards appeared behind the 2 girls. That was the first grade spell called Floating Plank. Its effect was just like its grade, it was not very big, and it could only create a translucent floating board. The size and maximum weight of the floating board created by this spell were originally affected by the caster's magic power. However, if this spell was launched with a scroll, then the maximum weight would be 1 square meter, and the weight would be 50 kilograms. The floating board created by this spell would move behind the caster, and it could be as far as 5 meters away. Now, the reason why Ohajisai and Eber used a scroll to launch this spell was to let Gerland, Hina, and T, who could not use flight, ride on it, and let Ohajisai and Eber carry it on their journey. The reason why they did not need to carry it was because this spell could block the weight. If they carried it, it would affect their flying speed due to the weight. If they used this spell, then it would not affect their flying speed. The only thing to worry about was whether Gerland, Hina, and T exceeded the limit of 50 kilograms. Fortunately, Hina and T were not that heavy, and the 2 of them could ride on 1 floating board. Gerland's heavy body was a problem, but she had a magic ring that could reduce the weight, so there was no problem. Thus, not long after, the group flew into the sky at the same time, and disappeared in midair. It had to be said that using the flight spell to hasten their journey was indeed very efficient. In less than an hour, the group arrived at the designated mountain range. Let's land at the edge of the mountain range. In midair, Ohajisai said so. There are many flying magic beasts in the mountain range. If we fly directly, we will definitely be attacked by a large number of flying magic beasts. The group nodded, and followed behind Ohajisai, descending towards the mountain range. Chapter 1198. In a corner of the forest at the edge of the mountain range, Noah and the rest landed on the ground at the same time. Noah raised his head and looked around. When they were in the air, Noah saw that this mountain range was basically a forest. As long as they crossed the forest, they would be able to reach the village on the other side of the mountain range, which was used by the Yakumo drug department to cultivate drugs. In fact, whether it was in the game or in this world, there was the existence of teleportation magic. That was magic that was above the 5th grade. Depending on the grade, the distance that teleportation magic could teleport and the number of people that it could carry would also be different. However, there was a type of magic called teleportation gate that could directly open a door between 2 locations, regardless of the distance between them. After passing through the door, then, no matter if it was a living or non-living thing, they would be able to instantly reach the location on the other side of the door. Noah did not know how to use this kind of magic. However, in Noah's treasure trove, there were many tools that could use the effect of portal. Moreover, even if he did not use those tools, Noah could use the guild weapon Ain's Ur Gong staff that he obtained from the underground tomb in Nasarick. If he used the portal, it would only take a moment to reach the village. However, teleportation magic would always be accompanied by many uncertainties. Just like the underground tomb in Nasarick, wouldn't it be able to hinder the activation of teleportation magic? There were many tribes of magical beasts living in this mountain range, and perhaps there would also be ways to hinder and delay the activation of teleportation magic. Therefore, if they were to recklessly activate the teleportation magic and cause the group to be teleported to places like the underground, then they would be done for. This was also the reason why Ohajisai did not suggest using teleportation magic. After all, Ibirui could use the 5th grade teleportation magic. Moreover, if they were to fly, they would also be attacked by flying magical beasts, so for the sake of safety, they still thought that they should use the method of walking to cross the mountain range. In the forest, with Noah as the leader, everyone was observing their surroundings and fell into silence. This was because everyone present could feel the murderous aura and heavy atmosphere in the air, which proved that there were magical beasts everywhere in the mountain range. "We need to be careful to avoid a fight," Ohagi lowered her voice and said to everyone. "Once we attract an entire tribe of magical beasts, even we will be at a disadvantage in battle." "It's not as simple as that, is it?" Ibilua suddenly interjected. "If we cause too much of a commotion and attract several magical beast tribes, then even we can only flee." "We'll have to see what kind of monster it is," Giglan said casually as he carried his weapon. "If they're goblins and ogres, it doesn't matter how many of them there are. On the other hand, if a few of the more powerful undying come, we'll be in big trouble," Tina said. "When I was collecting information, I heard that in this mountain range, there are indeed some powerful undead. Even the demon tribes are not willing to provoke them." "But don't we still have Mr. Noah and Iberia?" T retorted. "With those two around, even if there are powerful undead, it shouldn't be a problem, right?" Everyone's words made Noah mutter in his heart. That might not be the case. If there were undead like Shadya in this mountain range, then a few of them could really cause trouble for Noah. However, Shadya was a true ancestor of vampires at level 100. With the power level of this world, even if there were such existences, it was impossible for there to be so many of them. Moreover, this mountain range was not very far from human settlements. Many people had crossed this place before. If there really were undead of that level, then this place would have become a complete forbidden zone. No one would want to come here. "In short, it's better to be careful," Noah reminded. "I can feel the aura of many magical beasts mixed in the air. There should be many magical beasts living nearby. Regardless of their level, if we get entangled with them, it will definitely take some time. If it takes until night time, then it will be troublesome." Everyone immediately looked at each other and nodded their heads. If they were to fight at night, it would indeed be quite disadvantageous for humans. This was because many magical beasts had night vision and would not be affected by darkness. Humans did not have this ability. Although there were magic tools that could give people night vision, it was best to avoid fighting at night if they could avoid it. Moreover, it was not just night vision. Many magical beasts had powers that humans did not have. Undead would not tire, but humans needed to rest at night. Once they fought at night, it would definitely be very bad for humans. Immediately, after everyone confirmed the tools they could use, they raised their vigilance and walked into the forest. Noah walked at the back of the group of fine steel adventurers. No, the one walking at the back should be Annabelle. At this time, the combat maid was observing the surroundings while approaching Noah to ask for instructions from Noah. "Lord Noah, since we're going to fight the tribes of monsters and humans, why don't we ask Nasarick to send an army over?" "No need." Noah shook his head. "The creatures in Nasarick are all mutants. It is not suitable for them to move in groups in front of humans. Moreover, with our strength, it will not be difficult to solve this incident. There is no need to mobilize a large force. You just need to be ready to go all out at any time." "Yes." Annabelle bowed her head and accepted the order. Then she continued to guard Noah's back, vigilant of the surroundings. Although Annabelle was only level 63, she was an 8th order magic caster. As long as Annabelle went all out, she would definitely be a legendary existence for humans who could not even use 7th order magic. In order not to cause unnecessary trouble, Noah let Annabelle only use 5th order magic on the surface. However, if they really encountered trouble, they would be fools to hold back. So, the group began to move cautiously in the dense forest, but they moved unswervingly in the direction of the village. The forest was eerily silent. There was not even the sound of birds, beasts, or insects. Under such circumstances, in order to avoid fatigue caused by high concentration, Noah and the others divided into groups to guard the surroundings. However, the more they walked, the more Noah felt that something was wrong. It's a little strange, although Noah's muttering was soft, at this moment, even the sound of a needle falling to the ground could be heard clearly. No one could not hear his voice. "Mr. Noah, do you think so too?" Annabelle slowly came to Noah's side. She did not care about the difference between a man and a woman. She directly stuck close to Noah and let her voice be as soft as possible. In any case, it's really strange for it to be so quiet. Even if there are no birds, beasts, or insects, it's fine. There are many magical beast tribes living in this mountain range. It's impossible for there to be no movement. Noah did not care about the fragrance from Annabelle's body and said to himself. Moreover, the atmosphere in the air is getting more and more oppressive. It feels like something incredible is about to appear in front of us. Annabelle was silent. The forest where there were no signs of magical beasts was silent. That silence made one's hair stand on end. The forest was filled with a dangerous aura, not knowing what would happen at any time. The road started to become uneven again. Sometimes, there would even be 3 or 4 forks in the road. It was like an intricate maze. Annabelle, Ibirui, and the others did not want to miss a suspicious place. They spread out a security net in all directions. With the help of the map, they chose the path to their destination and went deeper into the forest. However, the more they went, the more the oppressive atmosphere and uneasiness spread in the hearts of the group. Finally, at a certain moment, Noah suddenly raised his head and looked forward. "It's here." This sentence did not elicit any reaction from anyone. It should be said that it did not have time to elicit any reaction from anyone. In the next second, in front of them, a slight tremor came very suddenly. Everyone's eyes narrowed. A large group of black shadows appeared without any warning and rushed over amidst the slight tremor of the ground. Chapter 1199. Rumble. As the tremors on the ground became more frequent and violent, the main body of a large group of black shadows that surged out from the forest in front was also exposed in front of everyone. It was a herd of horses. They were a group of 8-legged horses that were larger than ordinary horses. That's... Noah's eyes flashed. 8-legged horses. 8-legged horses. They were a type of demonic creature. They looked like horses, but had 8 legs. They were known for their outstanding muscle strength, endurance, and mobility, and were generally regarded as the most outstanding land demonic creatures. These demonic creatures were not unfamiliar to humans. Regardless of whether it was in kingdoms, empires, or theocracies, there were people who specialized in capturing and taming these demonic creatures for daily use. Of course, no matter how much they resembled horses, these 8-legged horses were still demonic creatures. Not only did they possess a certain degree of strength, but they were also extremely ferocious. It was extremely difficult to capture or tame them. Because of this, the market price of 8-legged horses was shockingly high. They were more expensive than 5 well-trained war horses. Even ordinary nobles couldn't easily own one. Now, the herd of 8-legged horses that numbered in the hundreds were like galloping wild beasts. They raised their heads and neighed at the sky with ferocious glints in their eyes. They charged forward in a frenzy amidst the powerful stomps of the ground. If such a herd of demonic creatures charged over, no matter how strong a person was, they would most likely lose their life to their powerful legs. Thus, without any hesitation, Hagrid gave the order. Go! Ebirua, Gorglant, Tina, and Tia raised their heads at the same time. They moved at the same time as if they had agreed beforehand. Roar, ooh, 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 ooh. The burly Geegland let out a furious roar. He raised the weapon in his hand and charged towards the horde of 8-legged horses in front of him. The weapon in Gorgland's hand was a warhammer with spikes protruding from the side like an axe. It was a first-tier weapon that could even shatter steel with a single strike. It wasn't just the weapon. Almost all of Gorgland's equipment could be considered top-tier magic tools. Geegland was like a war chariot as he fearlessly charged into the horde of 8-legged horses with his top-tier equipment and powerful physique. Just as Gorgland was about to come into contact with the horde of 8-legged horses, he smashed the warhammer in his hand heavily onto the ground. Bang! The moment the muffled sound rang out, a shocking shockwave burst out from the ground, smashing the ground into pieces. The shockwave that exploded surged toward the horde of 8-legged horses like a tide, sending the incredibly strong demonic creatures flying and instantly disrupting the horde's momentum. Chee! Almost at the same time, 2 black shadows tore through the air and shot out explosively from the sides of Gorland, who hadn't retracted his spiked warhammer from the ground. Like ghosts, they swept past the 8-legged horses that were sent flying. Poochie! The sound of their bodies being pierced reverberated through the air. It was the sound of the 8-legged horses' bodies being sliced apart by the sharp daggers in the instant that the 2 shadows flashed past them. In the next second, the 8-legged horses that were sliced apart by the sharp daggers fell to the ground one after another. The 8-legged horses that fell to the ground either turned a strange green all over, or their wounds didn't shed a single drop of blood. It was as if they had been sucked dry and shriveled up. The 8-legged horses that had turned a strange green all died from poison. The poison dagger that they had bought from Noah was fully utilized by Tina and Tia. In addition to the poison dagger, Tina and Tia also had their own famed weapon, the vampiric dagger. As the name implied, it was a special weapon that could absorb all blood in an instant. The 8-legged horses that didn't shed any blood and shriveled up were easily killed by this weapon. When Gorgland raised his warhammer again, Tina and Tia, who had turned into ghostly shadows, had already charged back and forth through the horde of 8-legged horses, killing dozens of 8-legged horses along the way. As for Ibirua, this young girl used fly when Gorgland, Tina, and Tia charged out. She floated in the air and waved her hand. Rich magic fluctuations immediately reverberated around her petite body. In the next moment, a series of crystal-like knight spears suddenly appeared around Ibirua. Like arrows, they shot out explosively and fell into the horde of 8-legged horses. Poochie 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 poochie. The powerful 8-legged horses were easily pierced through from top to bottom by the crystal spears. They fell to the ground amidst mournful cries. Seeing the crystal spears that appeared around Ibirua, Noah was slightly surprised. That's the 4th rank spell, Crystal Knight Spear. Ibirua smiled sweetly at Noah. Ibirua is an elemental mage, and her spell is limited to the most powerful type of earth element crystal. Hearing this, Noah looked at Ibirua with interest. As mentioned before, there were all kinds of professions in this world. Elemental mages were one of the professions of magic chanters. Elemental mages were specialized magic chanters that focused on strengthening a specific attribute. When these mages used spells that focused on strengthening a specific attribute, their attack power would increase by several times. But on the other hand, once their area of expertise was sealed, they would become very weak. For example, an elemental mage that focused on strengthening fire element magic would be several times stronger than a normal mage when using fire element magic. But if they were restrained by water element magic, their combat power would decrease several times. However, it was undeniable that elemental mages were the strongest among their peers when using spells that focused on strengthening an attribute. Ibirua was an elemental mage that focused on strengthening earth element magic. However, Ibirua didn't only focus on strengthening earth element magic, she also limited it to crystal element magic, increasing its power to the maximum. Earth element magic was related to strong acid, poison, gravity, and so on. Among these domains, there were also some specialized types that were more powerful than ordinary earth magic such as acid, poison, and gravity. Gemstones were one of the specialized earth element spells. And not only did Ibirua choose the specialized gemstone area, she also limited it to crystal element magic, achieving the true meaning of strengthening. Originally, elemental mages had the highest power among their peers when using spells that focused on strengthening an attribute. While becoming an elemental mage, Ibirui also chose the gem specialization, which was more powerful than most spells in the earth magic. Under such circumstances, Ibirua was still not satisfied. She restricted the crystal type of the gem specialization and strengthened the earth magic of the crystal type to the limit. Triple enhancement. One could only imagine how frightening Ibirui's earth magic was when she used crystal gem-enhanced earth magic. Noah even noticed that Annabelle couldn't help but glance at Ibirua. That was because Annabelle was also an elemental mage that focused on strengthening lightning element magic. That was why no one knew better than Annabelle just how much power Ibirua's extreme enhancement would bring out. Ibirua's level wasn't as high as Annabelle's. However, Annabelle had no choice but to pay attention to Ibirua, who had enhanced her magic to such an extent. Noah estimated that if Annabelle and Ibirua were to fight, Annabelle would still win. However, if Annabelle didn't use her most powerful 8th grade magic, it wouldn't be that easy to defeat Ibirua. Ibirua kept throwing her crystal knight spear, piercing through the bodies of 8-legged horses one after another. Tina and Tia also shuttled through the horde like a gust of wind, using their poison dagger and vampiric blade to instantly kill magical creatures. Gigrain also violently swung the heavy hammer in his hand, smashing away the 8-legged horses that were much stronger than him. Noah smiled faintly. As expected of a team of elite steel adventurers. Both their strength and cooperation are impeccable. Being praised by such an unfathomable person like Noah made Ibirua puff up her chest and reveal a happy expression. After all, that was Ibirua's team, wasn't it? Chapter 1200. Bam! When the last 8-legged horse fell to the ground with a muffled thud, the entire space returned to silence. In the dense forest, the 8-legged horses were lying on the ground in different states of death. Some were pierced through by crystal-like knight spears. Some had their chests crushed by violent spikes and hammers. Some of them were stained green by the extremely poisonous dagger. Some of them had their blood sucked dry by the bloody blades. There were so many different ways to die that it made one's hair stand on end. Among the horde of horse-like corpses, Ibirua, Giglant, Tina, and T stood in different positions and surveyed their surroundings. Even after dealing with hundreds of powerful magical creatures, the 4 fine steel adventurers didn't show the slightest sign of fatigue. That wasn't because the 4 of them were wearing magical tools that didn't allow them to get tired. Instead, it was because they were all fine steel adventurers. They were far from having to use their full strength to fight until they were out of breath. In particular, some of them were wearing magic tools that could restore physical strength and heal injuries. This level of danger was nothing compared to the true danger. Not only that, but the 4 of them were also in the mood to chat. Hundreds of 8-legged horses, they all died just like that. It's a pity. If we didn't have another mission this time, we would have captured all of these 8-legged horses and sold them. Even if they weren't tamed, some arrogant nobles would have eagerly bought them, right? That's one less chance to make a fortune. Ibirua, Giglant, Tina, and T chatted leisurely. Ibirua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Only Noah was slowly pacing between the 8-legged horse corpses. His brows were tightly furrowed, and the more he walked, the tighter his frown became. Ibirua keenly sensed that something was wrong with Noah and turned to Noah. "What's wrong?" Ibirua asked directly. "Is there something wrong?" "Something wrong." Noah stopped and shrugged. "Or should I say, there's something wrong from the start." Noah's words made Abirua and the others a little confused. What did he mean by that? Seeing this, Noah voiced his opinion. I think the process of you guys dealing with these 8-legged horses was a little too smooth. This sentence made Abirua and the others even more confused. What's so strange about it being so smooth? Geglin's manly and resolute face furrowed his brows into a knot. It's just a bunch of 8-legged horses. You don't think we had a hard time dealing with them, do you? Although the 8-legged horse was a demonic creature, it wasn't a big deal to those with true strength. After all, in human society, there were people who captured and tamed 8-legged horses and sold them as commodities. Many influential nobles even treated 8-legged horses as a symbol of status.